But this time, the great monk was insistent, continuously persuading Danbao that it would be best to go in. Perhaps this place had something to do with one of the Realm King. They had come all this way. Surely someone had arranged everything in secret. Otherwise, why would they end up here instead of directly entering the higher heavens of the Wanlu universe? Danbao had no choice, especially seeing the determined looks on everyone's faces, shimmering with golden light. Unable to refuse, he could only nod. Led by Lord Hengmu, the others followed suit. Divine Wood King was unfamiliar with this place, but seeing Lord Hengmu entering, he followed suit. Although the great monk was very interested in this place, he could still distinguish priorities and remained by Danbao's side without moving an inch. By the way, where's Jian Wushuang? Lian Xing, who hadn't gone down yet, looked around and didn't spot Jian Wushuang. Expressing surprise, could he have gotten lost? Perhaps he's gone in, the great monk added from the side. He had already sensed Wuli's aura, entering that city of the sky. That's why he remained so calm. There were indeed treasures in the sky, but obtaining them wasn't so easy. This legend was widely spread, known from the 8th Tribulation realm to ordinary people. But no one had ever found it. Initially, the great monk thought this place was just a legend. He didn't expect to see it today. That also meant his speculation was true. The path they were walking was arranged in advance by the Realm King. Through these trials, they could enter the higher heavens and then ascend the stairway to godhood at the Universe Sea. The first stone monument was just about finding the monkey head mushroom. It wasn't particularly difficult. He didn't know what purpose it served. But this place was different. Probably it led to entering the city of the sky. There must be extremely secretive things there. A strong aura suddenly burst from the valley below at that moment. Go! Danbao's figure flashed, leading everyone downward. The aura of a powerful entity emerged. Lord Hengmu at the forefront had already discerned the threat below. Jian Wushuang. The first one they spotted fleeing was Jian Wushuang. Then came countless vines striking. Seeing Lord Hengmu, Jian Wushuang felt a glimmer of hope and hastily exclaimed, Hengmu, help me hold him off. Before Lord Hengmu could respond, Jian Wushuang dashed past him without even a glance, then ran off. Lord Hengmu cursed loudly as the vines reached him, forcing him to intercept. Fortunately, despite their formidable aura, the vines lacked much power. As a native powerhouse of Wanlu, Lord Hengmu was utterly unfamiliar with these vines. After resisting for a moment, he found them not much of a threat. So he let 2 great battle beasts clear the way and continued flying downward himself. By now, Jian Wushuang had already spotted Divine Wood King, Danbao, and the others, so he calmed down and waited for everyone's arrival. How is it down there? Danbao descended with the others and asked Jian Wushuang. There are some minor ripples, but no significant threats. Jian Wushuang shook his head, then took a breath and continued. Wuli has already entered that sky garden, but when I tried to enter, I was stopped. Upon hearing this, everyone was stunned. Wuli had gone in, but Jian Wushuang couldn't. Many of the powerhouses didn't know much about Wuli. Most of their attention was on Jian Wushuang. But it was unexpected that Jian Wushuang was stopped while Wuli entered the city of the sky alone. You didn't go in. Elder Blue was also extremely surprised. He thought Jian Wushuang had gone in with Wuli, but now Jian Wushuang was outside while Wuli was inside. This was indeed beyond his expectations. Since there's no great danger, let's go down and take a look first. Danbao's scepter trembled, and the shield solidified once again. They plunged down. The huge savage beast that burst out of the water was on par with the 2 great battle beasts. Indeed, as Jian Wushuang had said, there wasn't much danger. Either Elder Blue or Divine Wood King alone could handle it. If they all joined forces, it probably wouldn't take more than a few breaths to resolve it. What's this? Elder Blue's gaze grew deep. Lord Hengmu didn't recognize these vines, but he did. Seeing Elder Blue's surprised expression, Jian Wushuang asked, Do you recognize them? Although these vines weren't powerful, they were extremely eerie. They exuded a tremendous pressure, almost nullifying the sensation of divine power fluctuations. They couldn't be underestimated. If Elder Blue knew the identity of the opponent, that would be best. Upon hearing Jian Wushuang's inquiry, Elder Blue didn't conceal anything. He just looked at Danbao and then spoke, "Young master, if I'm not mistaken, this should be that old man, Qi Tingue, a pinnacle 8th Tribulation Realm powerhouse from higher heavens. He went mad in search of the City of the Sky and later disappeared. I didn't expect him to appear here." After hearing this, Danbao moved his scepter, intending to suppress Qi Tingue with the power of life. If it were a cultivator who had fallen into madness, there was no need to besiege them. It sufficed to drive them away. But his life origin source, upon touching the Qi Tingue, had no effect at all. This left many people puzzled. In the past, Danbao could use the power of life to temporarily suppress the Qi Zhouxiao. Later, Qi Zhouxiao completely broke free from life and no longer succumbed to Danbao's suppression. How could an ancient cultivator, who hadn't even reached the peak of the 8th Tribulation Realm, withstand Danbao's suppression? Jian Wushuang's eyes flickered. He always felt that the oppressive feeling was getting stronger. Something bad was about to happen. Turned out to be true. Danbao couldn't suppress it at all. He quickly said to Divine Wood King and the Great Monk, "Since we can't suppress it, why not join forces to kill him? It's also a way to eliminate a disaster." Danbao was the god of life, and this kind of thing wasn't good for him to do. So let them handle it. Divine Wood King and the Great Monk had already planned for this. Upon hearing Jian Wushuang take the initiative, they immediately nodded in agreement. And deliberately avoiding Danbao, they went straight down. Danbao frowned. Not because he had become the god of life he should act like a saint. In fact, there was no need to do this. But under the support of everyone, he was too well protected. Being protected to become a god. On the path to godhood, not a drop of blood was allowed to stain him. When he first saw the Great Monk, he felt that what the other said made some sense. But now it seemed a bit off. Jian Wushuang didn't think too much about it, patting Danbao's shoulder and saying, "Don't worry. Since he doesn't succumb to your suppression, it means he has long been detached from life. His death has nothing to do with us. Don't feel too much pressure." Elder Blue also came to persuade at this time. Danbao shook his head without saying a word. "Senior Lianxing, aren't you going to join in the fun?" Jian Wushuang relaxed at this moment and looked towards Lianxing. With a strength at the peak of the 7th Tribulation Realm, over 2 million divine power, and a powerful legion of puppets, Lianxing had never shown his hand before. Jian Wushuang couldn't help but be curious and approached him. Lianxing smiled and replied, "With my current strength, it's not worth the embarrassment. But you, in the blink of an eye, have surpassed me." When Jian Wushuang had just erupted, his divine power indeed exceeded that of the other 7th Tribulation Realm experts. "It's just luck." Jian Wushuang scratched his nose and replied softly. Everyone else just smiled casually. Just as they were relaxed, the surface of the lake below began to tremble. This time it came with the City of the Sky. Everyone looked down, not worried about the battle below, but afraid of it affecting the City of the Sky. Jian Wushuang also learned about the City of the Sky from Lianxing. He just couldn't understand why it was called the City of the Sky when its outward appearance was lush like a garden. Why not call it the Sky Garden? Or was it because the strong ones in the Wanlu universe lacked culture and just picked some nice-sounding names? But the next moment, he understood why it was called the City of the Sky. Below the battle on the lake surface, Qi Tingue's figure continued to expand, and the lush vines on the City of the Sky were receding. The vines kept retreating and continuously converged onto Qi Tingue's body. At this moment, Qi Tingue's strength began to erupt. From the original 9 million divine power, it instantly broke through to over 10 million divine power. It was already comparable to Divine Wood King. And this was just the beginning. As the vines of the City of the Sky continued to diminish, the red vines of Qi Tingue kept increasing, and so was its divine power. The monk completely understood after seeing this. "Old man, Qi Tingue, I thought you were truly insane. But I didn't expect you to actually find the city of the sky and attempt to absorb its divine miracles. You deserve to die. The great monk's aura surged, no longer hesitating, wanting to end the battle quickly. But it wasn't so easy. Every time he cut off those vines, more vines appeared to obstruct his attack, making it impossible to get close. Divine Wood King faced the same situation. The two great war beasts were no longer opponents, and Lord Hungmu had already retreated behind Danbao. Seeing the danger below, Danbao couldn't care much anymore and took the initiative to descend, using the Shield of Life to protect the Divine Wood King and the monk. Don't linger in battle with him. Let's enter this city of the sky. After the vines disappeared, Danbao discovered that the city of the sky had changed and could be entered freely. Everyone nodded in agreement. Qi Tinggui's advancement was too rapid. His divine power had now increased to 15 million. Even with Divine Wood King and the Great Monk joining forces, they couldn't suppress it. If they waited a little longer, even if the Qi Juxiao came, it would be useless. Moreover, Babidi, accompanied by Qi Juxiao, had already followed. On the mountaintop, they had spent a long time here, but Babidi with Qi Juxiao cleared obstacles all the way, arriving much faster than them. Let's go! Danbao didn't hesitate. With a wave of his scepter, he led everyone into the city of the sky. Qi Tinggui lost his target and stood stunned for a moment before countless vines didn't know where to go. Finally, it let out a strange cry and once again delved into the vines and aimed at the city of the sky. Danbao and the others had already reached the city walls. After arriving at the city of the sky, they discovered something. Here, there was a rule of shrinking space. It looked small from the outside, but upon entering the city, they found it was enormous, the size of a world. What should we do? Divine Wood King was also a bit panicked. They couldn't win and they couldn't escape. Now that they had entered the city of the sky, they all knew it was a treasure trove. But what to do about this enormous threat? They couldn't just stand by and watch. Without the entanglement of the vines of Qi Tinggui, the city of the sky was just white. But with the entanglement of the vines, this place was just like what Jian Wushuang said. A sky garden. Danbao used the Shield of Life, but it couldn't stop the spread of the vines. At that moment they were at a loss. Unable to rely on the incarnation of Qi Tinggui, the group had to actively cut down the vines. But their progress was painfully slow. Just as they were feeling helpless, a deafening sound erupted from outside. Black fist shadows permanently imprinted themselves in the space, even etching onto the timeline. The group looked up in fear. A towering crimson giant, with thick palms, gripped the red vines while continuously pounding its incarnation with clenched fists. Jian Wushuang couldn't help but gulp at the sight. It was beyond belief. Even if Qi Tinggui weakened its divine power again and tried to attach to the city of the sky, it still retained at least tens of millions of divine power. Yet now, it appeared as vulnerable as a blade of grass before Qi Juxiao. Beaten to a pulp. If not for the deafening noise of the fight, they might not have noticed. Danbao, can your Shield of Life cover the entire city of the sky? Jian Wushuang looked down at Danbao, a thought forming in his mind. Before he could articulate it, Danbao understood. Yes, but it has to be done outside. Inside the city of the sky, this place was like a world unto itself, and Danbao's current life origin source wasn't enough to protect such a large area. But outside, the place was subject to the laws of compression. Internally, it was a world, but externally, it was no larger than a small mountain. Danbao could naturally shield them with the Shield of Life. However, this meant Danbao wouldn't be able to enter the city of the sky. Upon hearing this, Jian Wushuang lowered his head, realizing this approach was impractical. Them going in while Danbao stayed outside to fend off danger, how could that be acceptable? Even if Danbao agreed to it, they wouldn't allow him to do so. After all, they were all counting on Danbao to ascend to godhood and lift them up with him. This place is so vast. Even if that Babidi comes in, it won't be easy for him to find us. Besides, the young master's Shield of Life can withstand that giant from the Giant God clan. There's nothing to fear. We might as well explore together. The great monk remained calm. With continuous good news from Wu Li, there was nothing but treasure waiting for them below. There was no need to dwell on these matters. The others brightened up upon hearing this, seeing it as a viable solution. Danbao didn't look at the others but gazed at the black fist shadows in the sky. No, we can't let them in. Danbao shook his head. The appearance of the city of the sky was truly a test. If they couldn't defeat Qi Tinggui, so be it. But now, with the threat of Qi Zhouxiao added to the mix, they couldn't afford to let him in. They came here for various reasons. Even the great monk was curious about this place. Only Danbao grasped the essence of their mission. Perhaps they had come here to protect the city of the sky. To protect this divine marvel. I'll go out and hold them off. You guys go investigate the situation inside the city. With these words, everyone was shaken. Let Danbao go outside to face the enemy while they reap the benefits inside the city. This doesn't seem right at all. And some things just don't add up. Why did they come here? Certainly not for these ordinary treasures, but for the path to resurrection. Danbao, as the god of life, is the opener of the path to resurrection. Let Danbao take the brunt of it. Even if they have no face to show. Even if they were shameless, they wouldn't dare to do this. The monk was the first to object. Divine Wood King also stepped forward to persuade. The rest were also moved. Only Jian Wushuang remained silent. At this moment, Elder Blue also felt that it was unnecessary to act this way. Why not just let Bobby Emperor in? They could rely on Danbao's shield of life to resist. Danbao smiled faintly and reassured. Let them in. I also need to use the shield of life. I'll use it anywhere. Might as well use it outside. I agree. Jian Wushuang stood up and turned to the others, saying, I think Danbao is right. Since we're all going to rely on the shield of life to protect us, why not use it to safeguard the entire city of the sky outside, which is more important than us in the city of the sky? This last sentence was a bit ruthless, but it did calm the others down. Safeguarding the city of the sky is more important than them. What if this is the test? Danbao, I'll go out with you. Elder Blue nodded, choosing to support Danbao's decision. The rest going out wouldn't help. Although Elder Blue's strength wasn't great, he was of the same clan as Danbao. The two were of one mind. Seeing this, the great monk's eyes flashed with an imperceptible light, and he also stepped forward. All right, let's leave it at that. Danbao interrupted the actions of those who still wanted to go out. Only taking the great monk and Elder Blue with him, he left the city wall. Divine Wood King watched the backs of the three, sighing, truly worthy of being the god of life. For him to become a god, I admire him. Divine Wood King, let's go down and investigate this city of the sky first. Maybe there are some tricks here, and we can also make Danbao come back sooner. Seeing the other party continue talking endlessly, Jian Wushuang quickly interjected to remind everyone that they still needed to enter the city of the sky. Time couldn't afford to be wasted any longer. The others nodded in agreement. Seeing this, Divine Wood King began arranging people to search the area, dispersing them for a thorough investigation. Being the founder of the ancient Wood sect, he naturally possessed inherent leadership abilities. Each person was assigned to cover a specific area with their thought power, aiming to explore the entire city of the sky in the shortest possible time. Lian Xing, you go to the southeast district with Brother Wushuang to investigate together. No problem. Jian Wushuang and Lian Xing exchanged a similar smile before setting off. Divine Wood King was aware of their close relationship, deliberately pairing them up. The two of them moved at an extremely fast pace, arriving at a corner of the southeast district in just the time it takes for an incense stick to burn. However, the area was already quite extensive, requiring an hour for them to search thoroughly. It wasn't a matter of simply flying around but rather meticulously examining every corner. Wushuang, let's split up and search. Jian Wushuang nodded and replied, all right. The two of them separated and transformed into meteors, entering the city. As Jian Wushuang landed on the ground, he could finally sense the overwhelmingly transcendent feeling present. Divine power pulsed through the area. Clearly, someone of great power had been here before, perhaps a god. Merely residing in this place could turn it into an invaluable site for cultivation. Observing the material of the city walls, Jian Wushuang found nothing special about them. It was the lingering aura of that influential figure that had influenced the city of the sky. As he casually strolled along the deserted streets, a gentle breeze swept up the dry leaves on the white stone pavement, reminiscent of the mundane world. These leaves were probably left behind by Qi Tinggui, absorbing the power that the previous occupant had left behind. It was no wonder he was so formidable. If he were to retract all the vines back into his true form, he might not be inferior to Qi Zhouxiao. Unfortunately, before he could retract the vines, he was severely injured by Qi Zhouxiao. He might be on the brink of falling now. Jian Wushuang carefully searched each location along the streets. Too slow. He still felt he was moving too slowly. So he split into countless clones, flying out from a small courtyard in all directions, while the main body leisurely walked along the wide streets, casually entering any mansion to search around. There were still many movable objects in this area, such as tables, chairs, and lamps, even doors that could be dismantled and taken away. However, doing so would be sacrilegious. One of his avatars arrived in a courtyard somewhere, finding it impeccably clean with not even a door in sight. The windows were gone too. Someone really dared to do this. His telepathy spread out. In an instant, he detected a familiar aura. In this vicinity, it was just him, and Lianxing. Lianxing wouldn't stoop so low. So, it must be Wu Li who came in early. Whoosh! His figure flashed. Sensing that aura, his true self instantly teleported in front of Wu Li. Jian Wushuang. Wu Li, startled by someone approaching, jumped a bit. Then, seeing it was Jian Wushuang, he sighed in relief, complaining, "Can't you give a heads up before coming? You scared me." Seeing the chair Wu Li was holding, Jian Wushuang frowned and said, "That's enough. While there is indeed someone's aura on the items here, there's no need to break in. That's where you're wrong. If we just absorb them individually, even this chair, it would take you several days to completely absorb the aura above. We don't have time to wait now. It's better to take everything and absorb them outside slowly." Wu Li stepped forward, casually taking down a painting and handing it to Jian Wushuang, comforting him. "Don't overthink it. Though we both have substantial wealth, we still need to plan for the future. Our divine powers are similar, with basic divine power over 1,000,000. You know how troublesome it is to increase divine power later on. Not to mention the treasure spent. Just the time wasted on them is significant. These items not only don't cost you anything, but they also increase your divine power. Just this painting, absorb it well, and you'll gain at least 100 divine power. In any random courtyard here, you can find hundreds of similar items. That's 10,000 divine power. How much of the city of the sky do you dare to imagine?" Smack! Jian Wushuang, frowning, directly tossed the painting away. "Hey!" Wu Li, however, treasured it as if it were precious, hurriedly picking it up, intending to continue persuading. But Jian Wushuang interrupted him directly. "You keep yours, I'll keep mine. Don't worry about me. I came here not for these things." With that said, he vanished in a flash. What Wu Li said was right. Planning for the future was right. Once the scattered tribulation was to revive at some point. By then, the treasures to enhance divine power would probably double in price. Currently, those still enhancing their divine power were all universe masters. For the scattered tribulation experts, it was not only about cultivation but also about maintaining one's peak state, which was extremely taxing. Even staying alive had become a luxury. After resurrection, to cultivate once again and enhance divine power, one would need treasures. It was feared that other scattered tribulation experts, like Wu Li, were also scavenging for these items. Only he seemed indifferent. Perhaps there were a few others who were aloof. Like Lianxing, he probably looked down on these things. Divine Wood King looked down even more. Overseeing the entire ancient Wood sect, he wouldn't lack such items. Instead, this time he did something unusual. He had always felt that the city of the sky was not simple. One shouldn't lose a watermelon while picking sesame seeds. Moreover, he didn't value the improvement of basic divine power so much. Improving basic divine power bit by bit was too slow. It was better to perfect the super-eternal ancient transformation. To create a perfect super-eternal ancient transformation as soon as possible. Increasing strength 100-fold in one go. Currently, with just a 50-fold increase, his divine power could double. If it reached 100-fold. With a divine power of 1.5 million, it could double. What did that concept mean? 1.5 million, 3 million, 6 million. And he still had the life tribulation armor, which could increase by 500,000. So, with a perfect super-eternal ancient transformation, he would have 8 million divine power. Directly putting him on par with top-tier 8th Tribulation Realm experts. Plus his Sword Dao origin source, he could almost compete with peak 8th Tribulation Realm experts. That's why he looked down on these trivial things. He flew on, continuing his search. The southeast area was quickly searched clean. There was nothing special. Lianxing happened to meet him at this time. Seeing each other, they shook their heads. Let's go to the city center. I've studied the layout of the city of the sky. In remote places like this, it's likely that only ordinary people used to live here. Their things aren't anything special. It's only when the aura of a certain big shot lingers on them that they become valuable, attracting even the red vines of Qi Tinggui to absorb them. Lianxing had a deeper understanding of these things compared to Jian Wushuang. The buildings here didn't have a single style, representing different residents. Places where big shots lived would definitely not be here. Jian Wushuang, aren't you curious about who these big shots are? Lianxing looked at Jian Wushuang with interest. They had been searching for special places all along but hadn't speculated much about who the big shots might be. Lianxing brought up the matter now. Jian Wushuang raised an eyebrow, looking at Lianxing, knowing that the other party must have guessed something, and asked, "Have you found something, senior?" "It's not exactly a discovery. I just noticed that in some larger courtyards, there are many portraits hanging in the guest halls. This isn't particularly special, and even the portraits in each guest hall are mostly different. But there are still some overlaps, and one of the most overlapping portraits is unique." Lianxing finished speaking and took out several portraits with a wave of his hand. The figures in the portraits were the same. Green skin, pointed ears, white hair on their heads, but it was extremely sparse, only dense in the middle, and they wore earrings on their ears. Jian Wushuang had never seen such a group of people before. Each family has this portrait hanging. Could they be some important figures in the Wanlu universe? Lianxing nodded. It's possible. But do you think the people who lived here, where big shots cultivated, would be the same as the natives of the Wanlu universe? This made Jian Wushuang silent. Indeed, almost no one in the powerful figures of the Wanlu universe could find this place. Only Qi Tinggui had arrived here. If the people who had lived here before were from the Wanlu universe, this place would have been discovered long ago. Given the secrecy level of the city of the sky now, he didn't believe that those people here would be natives of the Wanlu universe. It was likely that they were brought here by some big shot themselves. That made sense. Let's meet with Divine Wood King and the others to see if they've found anything. Lianxing agreed. The two disappeared from their original location in a flash. They didn't pay attention to Wu Li, who was still scavenging for treasures below. In fact, there were quite a few who acted like Wu Li. They just weren't as greedy as him. Now, the biggest goal of those scattered tribulation survivors was revival and resurrection. And Wu Li was already a universe master, not very interested in revival or even the position of a demigod. Increasing his divine power was his biggest need. From the 3rd tribulation realm to the 6th tribulation realm quickly. Once this rapid improvement feeling stopped, it would drive a person insane. It was like a poor person who struggled for decades, accumulating enough wealth to buy a courtyard, only to suddenly buy a city because of an opportunity, and then being discovered to be the heir of a dynasty. The disparity would be huge. Once enough wealth was acquired, it would trigger greater greed. Jian Wushuang understood this well, but it wasn't easy to remind someone. In fact, a universe master like Wu Li should be low-key. His old man was already at the peak of the 8th tribulation realm. Now that he had become the guardian of the god of life, as long as Wu Li hugged his thigh, he wouldn't lack these treasures. He was thinking too small. After passing through the area where Wu Li was, he didn't stay, but followed Lianxing towards the main city. The core of the city of the sky was a vast plaza. There were no buildings on the plaza, only a series of towering columns, all carved from white stone and seamlessly integrated into one another. Here, the presence of any entity was at its strongest. Not even the tendrils of Qi Tingue could extend to this place. At this moment, the scattered experts who had arrived first were all seated in meditation. With the resurgence of vitality, they could gradually elevate their divine power using this vitality as a foundation. Though the amount was small, they could still sense the feeling of cultivation in advance. After all, many of these scattered experts had not cultivated for countless epochs, always secluded to preserve their vitality. Now, with sufficient vitality at last, they were all eagerly attempting to increase their basic divine power. Jian Wushuang descended with Lianxing and headed straight for Divine Wood King. Glancing around, it seemed that these people hadn't noticed anything. Divine Wood King, along with Lord Hengmu, was pacing near a formation at the center of the plaza. Seeing Jian Wushuang and Lianxing approach, they halted and looked over. "How is it? Any discoveries?" Lord Hengmu asked. Lianxing took out the portrait with the highest number of overlaps and spoke. "I don't know if this portrait counts, but have any of you noticed this person depicted here appearing anywhere?" Upon seeing the figure in the portrait, Divine Wood King paused for a moment. Then his gaze flickered as he turned directly to the massive formation behind them. When the scattered tribulation resurged, Lord Hengmu seemed to discern something from it. Jian Wushuang and Lianxing quickly approached, gazing at the formation. It was a massive hexagonal formation, not circular like usual, but still formidable in its complexity. This formation seemed unified, unlike the intricate ones they were familiar with. However, its simplicity made it particularly tricky to dismantle, lacking any obvious weaknesses. "What's this?" Jian Wushuang stared at the statue at the center of the formation, feeling a sense of recognition. "It looks just like the portrait. It seems this was the residence of a significant figure in the past," he exclaimed. Their astonishment drew a crowd. Jian Wushuang observed the statue, pacing along the edges of the formation. This could be the key to their breakthrough. Time was running short. The external treasures might not hold off for long. They had to act swiftly. While he wasn't a master of formations, there were surely experts among them, like Lianxing. "Lianxing, can you decipher the purpose of this formation?" Jian Wushuang whispered, hoping for a breakthrough. Divine Wood King also turned to Lianxing, requesting his assistance. With many eyes on him, Lianxing stepped forward, studying the formation. To him, this seemed more like the creation of practitioners rather than something divine. However, whoever constructed it was immensely powerful, likely a universe master of the Eighth Tribulation or beyond, and possibly not alone. Cracking it would be nearly impossible, but understanding its function was within reach. After a moment of exploration, Lianxing infused his divine power into the formation, using his consciousness to comprehend its intricacies. Suddenly, a hum resounded, and the formation erupted with powerful energy, forcing everyone back. Fortunately, the burst was brief, sparing them from harm. "Did you discover anything?" Divine Wood King inquired, noting the burst triggered by Lianxing's intervention. "This formation contains a complete space-time essence. My probing triggered its defensive mechanism, pushing us away," Lianxing explained, pointing to the central statue. "That statue is the core." This revelation wasn't surprising, but it emphasized the urgency of activating the formation to progress. Their initial hopes for treasures were fading. The true value lay in relics resonating with the powerful presence they sought. Despite exhaustive searching, they found no other clues. Unlike previous endeavors, there were no hints to follow, leaving them at a loss. Jian Wushuang felt uncertain. Having come this far, retreat seemed unthinkable. "Perhaps we should let Elder Danbao enter," someone suggested. "We've scoured the city to no avail. Maybe his presence will trigger something." Trigger something. Jian Wushuang considered the idea. It seemed reasonable. Relying solely on themselves was proving futile. Divine Wood King and Lord Hengmu exchanged glances, realizing they had no better options. Just as they were about to give up, a white light began to shimmer within the formation. The light appeared, and this time they were prepared, all stepping back. They were afraid of being shaken back by that same aura as before. However, after the light beam expanded this time, there was no similar aura eruption, but rather a projection descending from the sky. Projection descended. The formation emitted a buzzing sound. After a while, it slowly came to a stop. During this time, everyone also saw the figure in the projection clearly. A blue, chubby figure, wearing a black hat, with 2 tentacles on top of his head, looking extremely funny. "Who is this important person?" someone asked cautiously in a low voice. No one answered. Jian Wushuang recalled the portrait for a moment, feeling that the figure in the projection, while having the same skin color as the important person who built the city of the sky, looked very different in appearance. But now was not the time to dwell on this. What if they were wrong in their guess? Lord Hengmu was the most decisive. When he saw the projection descending, he knelt down. Jian Wushuang and Divine Wood King ignored Lord Hengmu, feeling that kneeling down wouldn't solve the problem. If it was disadvantageous to them, there was no point in begging for mercy. If it was advantageous to them, just standing and talking would be enough, so why kneel down? "It's quite lively here." A friendly voice came from the projection, and everyone breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing this gentle voice. At this moment, Jian Wushuang took the initiative to step forward and said, "Junior Jian Wushuang, I am glad to meet you. Senior." Regardless of whether the other party was the important person who built this place or not, they had to be respectful. After all, they were on someone else's territory. It was a pity that the great monk was not here. Otherwise, he could ask the blue chubby figure if he was one of the realm king. Jian Wushuang. The blue chubby figure walked out of the projection and directly came in front of everyone, to be precise, in front of Jian Wushuang. He lowered his head and looked carefully at Jian Wushuang, surprised. "Are you Jian Wushuang?" When these words were spoken, Jian Wushuang's expression changed slightly. He lowered his head and looked at himself, feeling somewhat bewildered. Not only did he not expect the other party to recognize him, but everyone present was also surprised that Jian Wushuang was related to the person in the projection. Divine Wood King looked at Jian Wushuang, marveling at how well-connected Jian Wushuang was. He seemed to know everyone. But Jian Wushuang really didn't recognize the other party, so he could only smile awkwardly and nod. "TSK, TSK. Just as my disciple said, you are indeed extraordinary," the blue chubby figure commented casually. However, Jian Wushuang was pleasantly surprised. When he heard the word disciple from the other party, his eyebrows twitched, becoming even more puzzled. How did another disciple come into the picture? He knew very few people in ancient moon spacetime. Some people either perished halfway or had already arrived here. Like Wu Li, Lian Xing was also one. The rest of them couldn't quite figure it out. Queen Yunji had only a casual acquaintance with the other party, merely receiving some guidance from them out of respect for Jinsheng. Could it be? Suddenly, something clicked in his mind, and he pointed at the chubby blue figure in surprise. Could it be them? Were they the ones who had come with him from Qishan Temple to the ancient moon spacetime? Apart from them, he couldn't think of anyone else. The chubby blue figure nodded and spoke up. "Yes, you were able to enter the ancient moon spacetime back then because of me." With these words, both Jian Wushuang and Divine Wood King were stunned. So, Jian Wushuang's identity was completely exposed. He truly wasn't a strong figure from the ancient moon spacetime. In the northern spacetime, there were 9 core temporal rivers. Jian Wushuang's extraordinary strength had made Divine Wood King long suspect whether Jian Wushuang came from even more powerful temporal rivers, but he never had the chance to verify it. Now, with the confirmation from the mysterious person in front of them, he fully believed it. However, Jian Wushuang didn't think so. When they first entered the ancient moon spacetime, it was Jinling who opened the temporal tunnel, which seemed unrelated to the chubby blue figure in front of them. Although he had doubted Jinling's abilities, it couldn't be this coincidental, could it? Back then, bringing these people was his intention. Surely, he couldn't be manipulated even in this matter. The chubby blue figure smirked as if he had seen through Jian Wushuang's thoughts and said, "If I hadn't permitted it back then, how could the temporal tunnel have been opened? In other words, if it were so easy to open the temporal tunnel, why didn't that flame god open the tunnel to Qixin Temple?" This time, Jian Wushuang was completely convinced. He quickly bowed and replied, "Thank you for your guidance. May I ask for your name, sir?" "I have no name. Born of heaven and earth. I only hold a small title. Realm King. Realm King." Upon hearing the self-proclaimed title, everyone involuntarily knelt down, including Jian Wushuang. They had heard rumors about the Realm King, but this was the first time they had seen him. At the same time, they were also puzzled about who was so lucky to become the disciple of the Realm King. They had thought Fan Tianfeng's luck was exceptional, but they hadn't expected someone to be able to become the Realm King's disciple. Could it be Tongtian Buddha? One of the top 3 talents in the original universe. Zhenling had once secretly evaluated him, saying that he could surpass Shang and wasn't inferior to Hu Qing. Hu Qing was unlikely because he was still in the ancient moon ruins. He was clear about the abilities of the others. Zhen Wuyang's talent was top-notch when he was at Qixin Temple, always overshadowed by Tongtian Buddha. Then there were Dongshang and Wan Yen, who weren't even as good as Zhen Wuyang. As for the other 2 from other universes, they weren't very impressive either. He reasoned through everyone, but he hadn't thought of Wu's. In his view, Wu's potential was quite ordinary. He wasn't even valued much by Qixin, let alone the Realm King. But this time he had underestimated Wu's. After exchanging a few words with Jian Wushuang, the Realm King went straight to the point. The position of the God of Life was brought up by Realm King. Being here wasn't a reunion with Jian Wushuang but rather due to Danbao's matter. Everyone now was more curious about the Realm King's intentions in bringing them here. With hands behind his back, Realm King scanned the crowd, paused for a moment. Then with a slight movement of the 2 antennae atop his head, he sensed the location of Danbao. "You lot are quite interesting. Making Danbao wait outside for that giant god clan while you come here yourselves." These words made Jian Wushuang and the others feel a bit ashamed. But this also fits the criteria set at the beginning. Realm King nodded in satisfaction. Only then did everyone breathe a sigh of relief. They had feared Realm King might blame them at this moment. Divine Wood King, emboldened at this moment, asked, "Lord Realm King, may I ask why you brought us to this place?" Then paused before continuing. "Shouldn't Danbao have entered the stairway to godhood directly after arriving here?" This was what Great Monk had said. They didn't know before. They wouldn't have known if it hadn't been brought up. But upon entering, they found it differed from what Great Monk had said. The God of Life concerns the life of the entire northern spacetime. It's not as simple as you think. The reason I set up these checkpoints here is to stop certain individuals. Jian Wushuang frowned, speaking up. "Could it be to stop Babidi?" "Babidi?" The Realm King shook his head, explaining, "I've noticed this Babidi fellow, he's not a threat. He can't even ascend the stairway to godhood. As for his resurrection secret technique, it's quite to my liking, he's quite talented. But unfortunately, being from the starry sky, he's destined not to become a god in our northern spacetime. Life from the starry sky naturally belonged to the starry sky. Coming to the river of time, not being excluded was good enough, wanting to become a god as well? Did they think everyone was from the giant god clan? The starry sky also had its own groups. Jian Wushuang, upon hearing the Realm King's explanation, pondered. It was somewhat different from what Great Monk had said initially. From the Realm King's expression, it seemed like anyone from the northern spacetime had the chance to become the god of life. There weren't the restrictions Great Monk mentioned. Perhaps those things were just Great Monk's own thoughts, pretending to be profound. He didn't dwell on it much. "The people I want to stop you may know in the future but not now. The fact that you're able to reach this place means there's no problem with yourselves, and you're qualified to enter the stairway with Danbao. The stairway to godhood." Everyone's faces brightened. Setting foot on the stairway to godhood together, they were also witnesses. How could they not be happy? In the future, They might become the first batch of scattered tribulation to be resurrected. Jian Wushuang didn't feel particularly excited upon hearing this. Just looking at the Realm King's figure, he felt puzzled. The other party was the strongest true god in the northern spacetime, yet only a projection came down. The real body didn't even come. According to him, since the god of life was so important, why not come in person? It was a bit illogical. Just then, Weiss's voice rang in his mind. This chubby guy, he's using you. Be careful. Jian Wushuang was startled by this sentence, quickly asking, could it be he's not Realm King? Who told you Realm King is a good person? Be cautious of anyone, no matter who they are. He felt a bit confused. So, none of them were good people, huh? But what could he possibly be used for? There were plenty of people stronger than him here. The Divine Wood King, Great Monk, and those two war beasts. Where would they need a universe master at the Sixth Tribulation Realm? Don't believe me? Weiss's eyebrows twitched, somewhat unhappy at being doubted, and with a slight movement, he appeared directly in front of Jian Wushuang. Realm King was still in the midst of a cordial conversation with Divine Wood King when suddenly, he noticed a tall figure, and his chubby body flinched in shock. Star Spirit. Jian Wushuang hadn't expected Weiss to show up, and Weiss seemed to have little regard for this Realm King of the northern spacetime. The Realm King, upon seeing Weiss, appeared even more astonished, his eyes nearly bulging out of their sockets. Under everyone's gaze, he immediately knelt down. Lord Star Spirit has graced us with his presence. Why wasn't this humble servant informed? Realm King knelt down with utmost respect. Divine Wood King was also taken aback, seeing Weiss's tall figure. He hesitated for a moment, then glanced at Realm King, unsure whether to kneel or stand. Weiss, who usually smiled before speaking, had a stern expression as he said, in my presence, why not reveal your true form? Realm King was somewhat at a loss. He actually wanted his true form to come out as well. But his true form was currently traversing a serpent path deep in the northern spacetime. Northern spacetime, above a vast ancient continent that towered over the 9 major spacetimes, countless palaces surrounded it. That was the closest place to his true form. It was also the cycle of reincarnation in the northern spacetime. Above the cycle of reincarnation, there was this serpent path. At this moment, Realm King's true form was walking on the serpent path. This serpent path couldn't be flown through, one could only walk on foot. Realm King wasn't alone. He was carrying someone on his back. Behind him was also a large gorilla. Phew! When the projection of his true form saw Weiss, he stiffened and stood still. On his back, Wuxia asked in surprise, Old man, why aren't you moving? Wuxia was also helpless. He could only be dragged along by Realm King after walking for a while. Otherwise, he would be exhausted to death on the serpent path. At this moment, Realm King suddenly stopped. Wuxia looked around and then asked, have we arrived? Don't speak. Realm King's true form loudly reprimanded him. Startled, Wuxia jumped. Realm King, who had never been angry before, was reprimanding him so loudly for the first time, which frightened him. He covered his mouth, afraid to say another word. In the city of the sky, the projection of Realm King was sweating profusely, unsure how to respond to Lord Weiss's words. Seeing Realm King's silence, Weiss said indifferently, if you won't speak, then shall I speak? No, your highness, I'll speak. Realm King got up from the ground, hesitated for a moment, then said dejectedly, the Wanlu universe is enveloped by a metallic life form. My true form can't enter. Honest enough. Weiss nodded, then continued, this willow tree originally doesn't belong to your northern spacetime. It remained here initially due to the lack of foundation in your northern spacetime. But what happened later? You harbored trouble, giving rise to the infamous disciple Celestial Maiden. It was I who cleaned up the mess for you. Now Wanlu is in trouble again. It seems it truly doesn't belong to your northern spacetime. As Weiss spoke, all the surrounding spacetime froze. Only Realm King and Jian Wushuang could move. At this moment, not only the spacetime in the city of the sky froze, but the entire northern spacetime was suspended. However, those cultivators couldn't perceive that time had been frozen. Even the gods couldn't detect it. This was the power of Weiss. The area Jian Wushuang's eyes could see was enveloped by the entire Wanlu universe. He was equally astonished by Weiss's power, but he didn't have much interest in Weiss's investigation into the Wanlu universe. He simply thought that the Northern Realm King was too incompetent to even guard a treasure. Gods. They were not invincible after all. Like the god of life, he could open the path of reincarnation, having the ability to resurrect the dead. However, he wasn't particularly skilled in combat. His invincibility lay in his mastery over life. Realm King, governing the entire northern spacetime, appearing to be invincible. In reality, it wasn't so. He was merely the spokesperson for the starry sky. He only had the ability to operate within the rules, not to alter them. So when the celestial maiden emerged, Realm King was helpless and could only summon stronger gods from the starry sky. Weiss. That was when he appeared in the northern spacetime. After resolving the issue with the celestial maiden, he didn't immediately leave but stayed to handle the aftermath. Of course, he also had his own matters to attend to, like waiting for Jian Wushuang's appearance. This time with Wanlu, I won't intervene. You have to handle it alone. Otherwise, I will reclaim the Wanlu divine wood. And as for the position of the god of life, you'll have to find another way. Weiss didn't give Realm King any face, speaking with a serious tone and no room for negotiation. Jian Wushuang also saw Weiss this serious for the first time, and he couldn't help but be shaken. Originally, he acknowledged Weiss's abilities but didn't think much of Weiss's status. He hadn't expected that even Realm King wouldn't dare to raise his head before Weiss. For a moment, he didn't dare to speak and just looked on. Realm King shifted his gaze but didn't dare to retort. He could only respectfully respond, "Lord Star Spirit, rest assured. I will handle Wanlio's matter. No ifs. If any accidents happen, I will take the Wanlu divine tree away. But I won't take away the trouble it causes. That metallic life form is one of the strongest practitioners from the southern spacetime. You better think it through." Yes. Realm King didn't say anything more and just agreed. Jian Wushuang listened, feeling stunned. One of the strongest practitioners from the southern spacetime, at least that meant they were at the 9th Tribulation Realm. In the entire northern spacetime, there were only 3 9th Tribulation Realm experts, those 3 eternal beings. But seeing how worried the Realm King was, it seemed that dispatching those 3 eternal beings wasn't simple. Otherwise, there wouldn't be such hesitation. It would be better to directly let the 3 super beings enter Wanlu and deal with that metallic life form. There was no need for them to waste time here. I've said what needs to be said. I won't care about what you do. Weiss stretched lazily, looking tired. He turned to Jian Wushuang and said casually, "You should be careful too. Careful of that big monk." As soon as he finished speaking, Weiss disappeared from the spot. He had already entered Jian Wushuang's origin source universe. Be careful of the big monk? Jian Wushuang's eyes flickered, thinking to himself, this old guy, he's definitely up to something. Ever since Realm King appeared, he had been suspicious of that old monk. But since the one recommended by Realm King himself, he had no reason to doubt. However, the old monk came from the Wanlu universe, and the Wanlu universe had the higher heavens. All of this seemed too coincidental. Before Weiss reminded him, he was still holding onto the fantasy that it was all just a coincidence. Now it seemed it was real. The higher heavens where Mieshang resided was the same higher heavens. This was probably something even Lord Hengmu didn't know. And he also understood some things from Weiss's words. For example, the god of life in the northern spacetime only managed the northern spacetime. The southern spacetime also had its own god of life. Mieshang came from the starry sky, most likely a god from there. With this realization, everything fell into place for him. Mieshang sought the power of life. He could have easily gone to the southern spacetime or the eastern spacetime. There was no need to come to the northern spacetime, a realm devoid of the birth of gods of life. His deliberate choice to come to the northern spacetime was probably to intercept the god of life. By devouring the god of life of the northern spacetime, he could forge reincarnation, and what he forged would be the reincarnation from the starry sky. Only through this could Miesheng justify the immense cost and plan everything accordingly. He glanced at Realm King, unsure if Realm King of the northern spacetime knew about Miesheng's scheme. Realm King must have known that Babidi came from the starry sky, so he should also be aware of Miesheng's existence. But he might not be aware of Miesheng's plot. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in such a hurry to obtain the position of the god of life. After Weiss left, the spacetime returned to normal. The Realm King also breathed a sigh of relief, casting a wary glance at Jian Wushuang. He hadn't expected Lord Weiss to still be in the northern spacetime, and within the origin source universe of the practitioner right before their eyes. This practitioner was one he had personally introduced. This time, he had indeed brought trouble upon himself. Thinking about that metallic life form, he felt a headache coming on. Gritting his teeth, he pondered for a moment before turning to the crowd and saying, "If you can help Danbao become the god of life this time, help him eliminate all threats. I will personally refine the origin source of the universe for you, allowing you to be reborn, and I can guarantee that each of you will reach the 8th tribulation realm. If you were already at the 8th tribulation realm, I will also refine the treasures needed to cross the 9th tribulation for you." When those at the 7th tribulation realm heard this, their expressions changed. Divine Wood King was particularly shaken. To refine treasures into the 9th tribulation realm. This was beyond his expectations. He had only hoped to reach demigod status at best. He never imagined there would be a chance to reach the 9th tribulation realm. Jian Wushuang was also astonished by Realm King's actions. Clearly, facing the pressure from Weiss, he was unwilling to abandon the Wanjia Divine Wood, nor did he want to confront that metallic life form. It was a colossal disaster. It not only threatened the divine of life but also the entire northern spacetime. Regarding this matter, Realm King spared no expense. He even directly produced a mustard seed and placed it before everyone. "Inside here are divine power forbidden fruits. As long as you swallow one, your divine power will double in the next hour. Of course, there will be backlash, but you need not worry about it. As long as the divine of life appears, it will help you recover." After speaking, he pushed the mustard seed towards the crowd. Divine Wood King caught it. There were a total of 76 inside. Exactly their number. Even Jian Wushuang and Wu Li each had one. "All I can do to help you is this. The rest depends on your luck." Realm King's gaze swept over everyone with determination. His voice was low. "Remember, you are not fighting for yourselves but for the entire northern spacetime. If you win this time, I guarantee that not only can you be resurrected, but you can also enter the main spacetime where there are even more powerful inheritances waiting for you." Upon hearing this, Divine Wood King's eyes widened involuntarily, and he couldn't help but ask, "Could it be the Realm Core continent?" "Yes, it is the continent of heart. I still have many Realm God tokens on me. Those who achieve great deeds can naturally obtain them." Realm King smiled faintly and continued, "As long as your contributions are significant, besides fixed God positions, I can fulfill any request, even the 9th tribulation realm." Phew! The crowd took a sharp breath. Realm King's words grew more grandiose. At this moment, they were all extremely excited, eager to go out and fight Babidi to the death. However, Jian Wushuang didn't feel too excited. Instead, he felt uneasy. He was the only one who knew the real situation. These people had no idea who their true opponent was this time. If they knew, perhaps they wouldn't be so excited. The overt threat was only Babidi. But secretly, there was still the metallic life form capable of threatening the Wanlu divine tree. And behind that, there was the shadow of Miesheng. This journey to the Wanjie was fraught with danger. It was far from as simple as they had imagined. There was also Weiss's promise. Tricking him into entering the Wanlu probably wasn't just to find treasures for his hairless cat. There must be something that prompted him to do so. Otherwise, he wouldn't have directly imparted the first half of the extreme freedom intent technique to him. Now he understood. In the universe of Wanlu, there must be some hidden great secret. The more the other party cared about it, the more afraid he became, especially Realm King. This old man didn't seem like a good person at all. How could he be so deceitful? Even he couldn't handle it, yet he let these cultivators go. What use were more treasures? Without life, it's all empty talk. Even this divine power, forbidden fruit, was meant for them to use desperately. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath. He was already on the thief's boat, and there was no turning back. He could only take it one step at a time. The rest of them were completely swayed by Realm King, eager to confront Babidi right away. Seeing this, Realm King quickly tried to reassure them, saying, "Remember, the real enemy may not always be obvious. Babidi is not a threat, he's merely a test. When necessary, we can even cooperate with him. Trust me. Babidi will never become the god of life. Rest assured, Realm King, we understand." Divinewood King muttered, still trying to gauge Realm King's intentions. Earlier, Realm King had praised Babidi as a talent, leading Divinewood King to believe that Babidi couldn't die. But Qi Zhouxiao had to, because death and life were opposites. The thoughts of the others were more or less similar. These old guys had lived through countless eons, yet they still speculated about others. But this time they were fooled by Realm King. Taking a deep breath, Realm King felt that if he said more, they might grasp more. So he cut to the chase, saying, "It's up to you now. This formation will send you to the higher heavens. It's all up to you when you get there." With that, the projection vanished. And at that moment, the formation closed its barrier. They could enter freely, but unlocking it required the power of life. That was simple enough. Once Danbao arrived, they could easily unlock it. Even Jian Wushuang himself had the ability to unlock it. But without Danbao, their unlocking it would be useless. It was like going to cultivate without bringing one's brain. Danbao had to come along. After briefly inspecting the formation, Divinewood King turned to Jian Wushuang and said, "Friend Wushuang, can your life force also unlock this formation?" "It can." Jian Wushuang nodded, uncertain of the other's intentions. Upon receiving confirmation, Divinewood grinned and continued, "I have a plan to shake off Babidi." "What scheme?" The crowd gathered around. Jian Wushuang was also curious. But after Divinewood King finished speaking, he regretted agreeing to the other party. The other side wanted to use his life force to activate the formation, then inform Danbao to come in, and they could instantly activate the formation and shake off Babidi. Sounded good. But in practice, it wasn't so easy. The life force needed for the formation could resurrect a whole universe. Even he would need a day's time. If Danbao activated the formation, maybe the time of an incense stick would be enough. At this moment, as long as Divinewood King and the Great Monk bought time outside. Obviously, Divinewood King was already afraid of Qi Zhouxiao and didn't dare to take any more risks. That's why he asked Jian Wushuang to do it. Thinking about it, it makes sense. Realm King had already said not to care about threats like Babidi. "Okay." Jian Wushuang nodded, agreeing. Seeing this, Divinewood King exclaimed excitedly, "This time, junior brother Jian's contribution is immense. Following Lord Danbao in the future will surely lead to boundless prospects. Don't waste time. Let's start directly." Lord Hengmu couldn't wait any longer. Jian Wushuang rolled his eyes, ignoring these people, and walked into the formation. Entering the large formation, he first walked to the central statue. The place to inject life force was right here. As long as there was enough life force, the formation could be activated. He didn't rush to inject life force but carefully observed the sculpture. Just now, he didn't look closely from the outside, but now, after a close look, he found that this sculpture was somewhat familiar to Realm King. Originally thought it was Realm King's masterpiece, but after Realm King appeared and saw the face clearly, it was different from the sculpture. Realm King wore a hat and had a relatively plump body. The sculpture in front of him, however, was somewhat thin and not very tall. But it was able to build the city of the sky in the Wanlu universe. It must have had a significant background. The Wanlu universe, or rather, this Wanlu divine tree, was brought over by Weiss to supplement the foundation of the northern spacetime. So, This Wanlu divine tree in the entire northern spacetime was one of the most top-notch treasures. Qualified figures for resting in this place. Apart from the Realm King, he couldn't think of anyone else. But now, looking at the carvings, it wasn't the Realm King, and he was so surprised. The secret of this place may be related to this carving. Jian Wushuang secretly speculated. After circling around, he didn't hesitate either, immediately injecting the power of life. A large amount of life force entered the carving. But this carving was like a bottomless pit. One day, he overestimated himself. It took almost 2 days before he injected about 99%. Divine Wood King urged him several times. If it weren't for the other party's strength, he would have wanted to give the other party a sword. Does he really think his life force is worthless? Such a huge life force, all transformed from the power of all things. All things. It needs treasures to condense. How much could he condense by himself? It's okay to maintain a fight normally, but if he really wants to output endlessly, he still needs treasures to replenish. The treasures he obtained in the infinite great world before, as well as his own accumulation, all went in. Even the primordial stones were spent. Now, his pockets are cleaner than his face. Fortunately, the fruits he obtained were already condensed into the origin source chess pieces in advance. Otherwise, he would have lost too much this time. Now everyone is so excited. They can't wait to sacrifice themselves for the Danbao and become gods. He didn't even dare to mention his expenses. He could only swallow it. Can also be considered as helping Danbao make sacrifices for them. Since this time he is clinging to the thighs, sacrificing a bit is also good so that he seems useful. Divine Wood King, you go to support Danbao. I'll stay here to guard. Okay. After making a gesture to the other party, Jian Wushuang breathed a sigh of relief. Lord Hengmu led the people into the array. Divine Wood King went to support Danbao. Outside the city of the sky, Danbao's charlotte of life resisted for 2 days and 2 nights. Not only was Babidi surprised, even Danbao himself didn't expect that his life force could be endless. Although he had the origin source of life, but nothing came out of thin air. There will always be times when it can't hold on. He hasn't become a god of life yet. Sure enough, under the attack of Qi Zhuxiao, cracks appeared in the shield of life. Seeing this, the big monk's heart sank. He angrily scolded Divine Wood King and others for dragging things out, saying that 1 day's time had been delayed by a day. Young master, let's retreat. The great monk's tone was tense. If we keep going like this, within the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, Qi Zhuxiao will be able to shatter this shield of life. The time it takes for an incense stick to burn is said to be long. Once cracks appear, it may be instantly broken. Danbao also understood, but now if they retreat, all previous efforts will be in vain. Can only grit his teeth and persevere. Unmoved. But the life shield cannot withstand Qi Zhuxiao just by perseverance. As his life force continued to decline, the shield shattered. Crash. The shield of life broke. The big monk resolutely stood in front of Danbao. Blue also followed suit. Let's go. Now is not the time for a direct confrontation. The great monk turned to Blue and said, You take the young master and go quickly. Leave this to me. Seeing this, Blue understood the situation and, grabbing Danbao, headed straight for the city of the sky to escape. The divine power on the great monk surged suddenly, and with a flying kick, he directly intercepted Qi Zhuxiao. TSK. Overestimating your abilities. Babidi sneered. Behind them, Hun Tian and the others bypassed the great monk and rushed towards Danbao. Blue transformed into a true dragon, possessing the strength of a half-step 8 Tribulation Realm, which was already comparable to the dragon god of the past. However, facing several peak 7th Tribulation Realm experts and 1/8 Tribulation Realm expert, he still felt powerless. He could only rely on speed to resist. The 2 great war beasts, together with the great monk, barely withstood Qi Zhuxiao, but in just a breath, they were broken through. Just when they were in despair, Divine Wood King arrived. After entering the city, find Jian Wushuang. Leave this to me. Divine Wood King shouted angrily, and with a shake of his aura, He forced Hun Tian and the others back. Then he charged towards Qi Zhouxiao at random. Only with the joint efforts of the big monk could they barely hold back Qi Zhouxiao. The two great war beasts were like decorations. Peak 8 Tribulation's realm experts were like ants in front of Qi Zhouxiao. If it weren't for the strong defense of the war beasts themselves, Qi Zhouxiao could probably kill the two war beasts with a single stroke. It took 2 Peak 8th Tribulation Realm war beasts and 2 Peak 8th Tribulation Realm experts to barely hold back Qi Zhouxiao. Divine Wood. Can the formation be activated? The great monk, in his panic, revealed something. The nearby Divine Wood King's eyes flickered, but his expression remained unchanged as he replied, "The formation can be activated. It only lacks a bit of life force. If Master Danbao goes forward, it can be activated instantly. We also need to retreat." Upon hearing that the formation could be activated, the great monk's divine power decreased considerably, giving him some confidence. On the other side, Danbao had already arrived at the City of the Sky with Elder Blue. With no pursuers, their journey was remarkably smooth, and before long, they reached the central square of the city. "Hurry! Enter the formation." Jian Wushuang felt a bit anxious seeing Elder Blue and Danbao coming in a sorry state. At the same time, he also sensed the oppressive aura from Qi Zhouxiao. Babidi and his companions also entered the city and were swiftly approaching their location. Although Divine Wood King and his group managed to block Qi Zhouxiao, they themselves were unable to move. Babidi, on the other hand, led his people bypass Divine Wood King and his group and followed Elder Blue and Danbao straight to the square. As Danbao stepped into the formation, Babidi tried to follow right after. The strong individuals within the formation were all at the 7th Tribulation Realm. The strongest among them was Lord Hengmu, who wasted no time leading several peak 7th Tribulation Realm experts out. "You're injured." Jian Wushuang placed a hand on Danbao's shoulder, surprised. "Why is your life force diminished?" "It's nothing. Just my shield of life has been depleted too much." Danbao shook his head. But now, Jian Wushuang had to activate the formation himself since there was a bit of life force lacking. He could only turn back and continue to infuse life force. With Danbao's strong spirit, he realized there was still a shortage and stepped forward to infuse life force together. At this moment, Wu Li approached and gave the life fruit he obtained to Danbao and Jian Wushuang. This surprised Jian Wushuang greatly. He hadn't expected Wu Li to change so much, knowing how to contribute. "Brother Wushuang, you have to hold on. Whether I can reach the 8th Tribulation Realm depends on you." Wu Li couldn't say it directly, so he transmitted his thoughts to Jian Wushuang. Hearing the other's true thoughts, Jian Wushuang grinned. Wu Li was still the same person he knew, unchanged in the slightest. "Don't worry." He didn't say much and joined Danbao in infusing life force. Meanwhile, Lord Hengmu held off Babidi and his group. Although Hun Tian was powerful, when facing Lord Hengmu, they were evenly matched. Both were at the half-step 8th Tribulation Realm. As long as Divine Wood King freed up a hand, he could easily cripple his opponent. Unfortunately, both Divine Wood King and the Great Monk were currently on the defensive, with no room to retreat further, having reached the perimeter of the array. At this moment, the life force within the carvings was also at its peak, permeating the entire formation with a greenish hue. Seeing this, Jian Wushuang felt a surge of joy within him. The life force of the Danbao was indeed formidable. Even if just a fraction of it were forcibly extracted, it would surpass his own by countless times. "Quick! Enter the formation. We only have a moment." He transmitted this message instantly. Lord Hengmu immediately led his people to retreat. Divine Wood King and the Great Monk exchanged a glance, condensing a large amount of divine power and hurling it towards Qi Zhouxiao simultaneously, before turning to rush into the formation. Babidi, sensing something amiss, hastily warned, "Qi Zhouxiao, don't bother with them. Break the formation first." Qi Zhouxiao, towering, raised his hand to deflect the two clusters of condensed divine power, and then raised his fist, smashing fiercely onto the formation. Everything happened too quickly. The Divine Wood King and the Great Monk had just entered the formation when they felt a tremendous pressure. The formation began to decay. Jian Wushuang was taken aback. Who could have constructed this formation? Logically speaking, even with Qi Juxiao's half-step ninth tribulation realm strength, he shouldn't be able to destroy it. The ground kept trembling and sinking, making Jian Wushuang struggle to maintain his balance. Danbao and Wu Li, closest to him, almost stumbled, but he managed to support them. Qi Juxiao, with one hand holding Danbao and the other holding Wu Li, Jian Wushuang looked up at the sky where Qi Juxiao stood, his gaze filled with fear. A massive shadow of a fist descended once again. Wu Li shut his eyes directly, while Danbao took a step back. Jian Wushuang immediately unleashed his super-eternal ancient transformation, ready to swallow the forbidden divine power fruit. Once the formation was damaged, there would be no way to teleport. They would have to escape with Danbao. As for the others, he had no time to spare. Brum Elder would have to take care of himself. Boom! Just before the shadow fell on the formation, it activated completely, and everyone standing on the formation vanished instantly. Qi Juxiao's fist also struck the center of the formation. But there was not a single figure left on the formation. Babidi was furious, cursing loudly. This time, the formation was truly destroyed. They would have no idea when they could catch up again. Damn it! Babidi's eyes were ablaze with anger. Rising into the air, he looked around and saw nothing but chaotic scenes except for the valley. They had no idea which way to go. With the formation shattered, even he couldn't repair it. To leave this place and find Jian Wushuang and the others, they would have to fly out. Ah! Babidi's eyes lit up with a flash of insight as he remembered Qi Tinggui defeated by Qi Juxiao. The opponent was also at about the half-step ninth tribulation realm. Unfortunately, they had still lost to Qi Juxiao. But Babidi hadn't killed the opponent. It was a great force to be wasted if he did. As long as he enslaved the opponent and let him fully absorb the aura inside the City of the Sky, it would be like having another half-step ninth tribulation realm servant. How could he bear to kill such a resource? Now it seemed that the opponent not only was a helper but also possibly knew how to leave this place. This time, Babidi's luck seemed to be good, as he had guessed right. Qi Tinggui indeed knew how to leave, but the journey ahead was perilous. Even 8th Tribulation Realm powerhouses might fall. But Babidi wasn't worried at all because he had 2 half-step 9th Tribulation Realm powerhouses, and no one could stop them. The next time they encountered Jian Wushuang and the others, it wouldn't be as simple as this time. Being able to break through the shield of life meant there was hope. In this way, they wouldn't be at a loss. Meanwhile, Jian Wushuang and the others also realized that relying on Danbao alone was not enough for their protection. No wonder Realm King had given them forbidden divine power fruits. Everything still relied on their own efforts. Swish! As the formation activated, they instantly left the City of the Sky. They even left that time and space, entering the interior of the Wanlu universe completely due to the destruction of the formation. However, an accident occurred when they were being transported. A fissure opened in the midst of the shuttle's black hole. Jian Wushuang dragged Danbao and Wu Li directly into the fissure. This kind of fissure posed little threat to them. But being separated from the Divine Wood King and the others was a big trouble. Seeing Jian Wushuang taking Danbao into the fissure, the great monk and Divine Wood King's heart sank. When they tried to follow, the fissure began to close. They couldn't get in at all. Get out of the way. Let me blast it open. The great monk was the most anxious, pushing aside Divine Wood King and attacking towards the edge of the black hole. Divine Wood King was greatly alarmed, quickly advising, "Even if you blast your way in, you won't find Danbao." Deep down, he cursed the great monk, who seemed to lack even the most basic understanding of spacetime. Within the spatial realm, one could locate targets based on spatial markers. However, within these spacetime black holes, time was entwined. In just that split second, who knew how many spaces they had traversed? Yet the great monk intended to find Danbao through his unyielding and stubborn methods. This was utterly absurd. An 8th Tribulation Realm expert, yet seemingly ignorant of such principles. Divine Wood King began to suspect if the great monk had lost his mind. "What do you suggest then?" The great monk, in a fit of frustration, turned to Divine Wood King. Elder Blue wasn't worried, as he had faith in Jian Wushuang, but the rest had their sights set on Danbao. Now that Danbao had disappeared into a black hole crevice, who would they follow? No need to panic. Divine Wood King's gaze shifted. Then he spoke. We continue onwards. Blue is of the same clan as Danbao. He will inevitably sense Danbao's aura. We'll just follow that aura. How vast can a Wanlu universe be? Upon hearing this, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Only the great monk's eyes widened, scanning the group, trembling as he said, Go inside, and you'll know how vast it is. The Wanlu universe, comparable to over half of the ancient moon spacetime. Truly, to search within, it would take not just years but perhaps decades. The rules there were unlike those of the ancient moon spacetime. Speed might be significantly reduced. If by chance, Danbao wasn't in the higher heavens, they would have to descend to the lower realms. That would be even slower. But for now, there was no better option. Moreover, most of these people still trusted Divine Wood King. After all, he was the founder of the Ancient Wood sect and a formidable figure in the Ancient Wood continent. Although the great monk was powerful, he was merely one of the first to pledge allegiance to Danbao, with some distance remaining. On the other side, Jian Wushuang and the others were swept into the black hole crevice. Yet they remained calm. In the chaotic space, he began to sense the aura with his psychic power, sensing the breath of life. Wherever there was the breath of life in that space, that would be the primary space. Jian Wushuang's eyes lit up. Looking towards a mirrored space, he said, It's here. Let's go in. Wu Li and Danbao didn't hesitate and followed him straight into the fray. Within that mirrored space, Jian Wushuang not only sensed the breath of life, but also felt a powerful divine energy fluctuation. Moreover, the mirrored space was unstable, evidently in the midst of battle. The conflict caused space to shatter, but time remained stable, allowing them to take advantage and enter. As for the threat, they hadn't really considered it. Surely they wouldn't be unlucky enough to encounter an 8th Tribulation Realm expert. Even if they did, with Jian Wushuang's current strength, he could hold his own in such a battle. If things got too tough, they could always retreat. As long as they didn't encounter a half-step 9th Tribulation Realm expert, even if facing a peak 8th Tribulation Realm opponent, he could escape in their presence. Furthermore, he now possessed a divine power fruit. With the transformation of the super ancient times, he had 4 million units of divine power. Coupled with the doubling effect of the divine power fruit, that amounted to 8 million. This was already the peak combat power of the 8th Tribulation Realm. Naturally, he felt confident. With a tearing sound, he casually ripped through the mirrored space, pulling Danbao and Wu Li along as they entered the space. Swish! Buzz! They had just entered the primary spacetime, the interior of the Wanlu universe. What met their eyes was darkness and rumbling. Countless huge dust particles floated in the sky. Although called dust, each piece was the size of a fist. As Jian Wushuang had speculated, there was indeed a battle here. Could be said that divine beings filled the sky with boundless divine power. The battle here wasn't as simple as one or two individuals fighting. It resembled more of a national conflict. The gathering of strong individuals on both sides exceeded billions. The weakest were emperor-level powerhouses. These emperors battled on the ground. Each formidable array of monstrous beasts, composed of millions of emperors, could contend with the universe masters. There were also countless Tribulation Realm experts, most of them at the 3rd Tribulation Realm. Among them were also the auras of 5th Tribulation Realm, even 6th Tribulation Realm. Jian Wushuang and the others looked around like headless flies. Their current position was quite awkward. It seemed like they were right at the core of the battlefield. Amidst the countless clashes, the three of them seemed insignificant. Of course, this was because Jian Wushuang had concealed their tracks with his aura. Otherwise, if their auras were exposed, not to mention Danbao, even Wu Li with his 6th Tribulation Realm aura and over 1 million units of divine power, was comparable to the 7th Tribulation Realm. Looking around, the strongest here were only at the 7th Tribulation Realm. If they suddenly revealed themselves, it would likely startle the opponents. Let's go! Jian Wushuang wasn't interested in this battle. After figuring out the direction, he prepared to leave. But seeing Danbao's expression, he took a deep breath. The god of life witnessed countless powerhouses battling, countless lives perishing. How could they just turn a blind eye and leave? Even Wu Li, who wasn't particularly sensitive, could see that. Brother Wushuang, this isn't right. All beings are supposed to be free. Seeing them trapped in such dire circumstances, how can we sit idly by? If you won't act, then let me. After speaking, Wu Li directly pulled Jian Wushuang's aura. His divine power shook, and countless powerhouses around them were instantly shaken away. Those gathered formations also instantly collapsed. Millions of emperors died instantly. Wu Li awkwardly smiled. Sorry, I didn't control it well. Those emperors closest to them were reduced to ashes. Danbao's face was ashen, but he didn't show any intention to blame Wu Li. Jian Wushuang secretly chuckled at Wu Li's flattery. Not as good as his old man, who was quick to take advantage of such situations. Since Wu Li had already stepped forward, he also had to show some gesture. Danbao, what do you think? He wanted to clarify the meaning of Danbao, preferably by listening to the other party, to avoid ending up with a thankless task. But this time, Danbao shook his head and said, In this world, where there is life, there is death. It's a cycle we cannot intervene in. Wu Li's expression changed, not expecting Danbao to say such words. Jian Wushuang, however, nodded in admiration, but feeling several gazes descend upon them, he calmly said, It seems we have no choice but to intervene. Wu Li's exposure immediately caught the attention of those at the seventh tribulation realm, and at least 3 of them emitted the aura of the seventh tribulation realm. One of them was at the peak of the seventh tribulation realm, with divine power of about 1.8 million. And there were 2 other seventh tribulation realm experts with divine power of 1.5 million. These 3 auras were not friendly towards each other. Clearly, they were in hostile relations. Swish! 3 figures descended from the heavens, instantly appearing in front of Jian Wushuang and the others. At the same time, they ordered a halt to the fighting. The billions of experts on both sides each retreated tens of thousands of miles, then looked towards the few individuals in the center of the battlefield. Wu Li glanced around calmly, his expression unchanged. As a seventh tribulation realm expert, he remained unruffled. With Jian Wushuang present, even the arrival of an 8th tribulation realm posed little threat. Dear fellows, this is the territory of the Zhenwu dynasty. May I inquire as to the purpose of your visit? Spoke the foremost 7th tribulation realm expert. The other 2 7th tribulation realm experts, not to be outdone, retorted angrily, This land belongs to our southern cloud kingdom. There's no need for your Zhenwu dynasty to interrogate us. Their words immediately sowed discord, itching for a fight. Wu Li watched the scene unfold with interest, almost eager to witness their clash. After all, even Danbao seemed uninterested in intervening. Zhenwu dynasty. Upon hearing this familiar name, Jian Wushuang's heart trembled. It reminded him of Zhen Wuyang and flashed scenes from his past through his mind, drawing him back to the Great Sea region. Memories resurfaced of his time in the Great Sea region, a period he considered the worst despite the few friends he made there. It was a time of boredom and adversity, the memory of which almost faded as he ventured into the Great Desolate and then into the Qixin Temple spacetime. The last time he recalled the Great Sea region was when Zhen Wuyang informed him of its destruction. With the Great Sea region gone, memories now revolved around Zhen Wuyang, the noble emperor, the pride of the Great Sea region, the powerhouse of the original universe. Once glorious but now lost in the void after entering the ancient moon spacetime. Now, upon hearing the name Zhenwu again, his mind involuntarily turned to Zhen Wuyang. Simultaneously, he couldn't help but feel a slight affinity towards the Zhenwu dynasty. With just a glance, he could sense from their aura that indeed, this was the territory of the Zhenwu dynasty. What if it was a conspiracy by the Zhenwu dynasty? Immediately, they rose into the air, blocking Jian Wushuang and the others' path. In the distance, 3 powerful auras were steadily approaching. It was evident that the Southern Cloud Kingdom had come prepared. What's the meaning of this? Jian Wushuang's expression changed as he also sensed the threatening aura from afar. At least 3 top-tier experts at the 7th Tribulation Realm. The 2 7th Tribulation Realm experts from the Southern Cloud Kingdom sneered, their tone unfriendly. I've said it before, this place belongs to the Southern Cloud Kingdom. You can come or leave as you wish, but isn't this disrespecting the Southern Cloud Kingdom's face, especially after killing our Imperial Emperor? The 7th Tribulation Realm expert from the Zhenwu dynasty below took a half-step back, preparing to watch the show. Deep down, there was also a sense of apprehension. They feared it might be a ploy by the Southern Cloud Kingdom, but being embroiled in a war vortex, surrounded by enemies on all sides, they couldn't spare extra experts to this place. He could only hold the fort alone here. At the same time, he prayed inwardly that the arrival of these 3 mysterious experts had nothing to do with the Southern Cloud Kingdom. In that case, if they started fighting each other, he could buy some time. Humph! Wu Li's expression shifted, and he stepped forward directly. With his current strength at the peak of the 7th Tribulation Realm, how could he fear these 2 ordinary 7th Tribulation Realm experts? Seeing them dare to block the way, he immediately surged with divine power, erupting with all his might. Ha! The 2 Southern Cloud Kingdom experts were also startled to find that Wu Li's divine power surpassed theirs. But seeing his realm was only at the 6th Tribulation Realm, they felt somewhat panicked, afraid of hitting a brick wall. But Wu Li's outburst made them more convinced that it was a scheme by the Zhenwu dynasty. Zhenwu Marquis, your Zhenwu dynasty really hides its cards well, unexpectedly concealing such super experts? The 7th Tribulation Realm expert from the Zhenwu dynasty, the Zhenwu Marquis, didn't respond. But there was a trace of fear in his eyes. He immediately gestured for the army of cultivators behind him to retreat. If a fight broke out between 7th Tribulation Realm experts, this place would be destroyed. Those cultivator armies wouldn't be able to withstand the shockwaves of divine power. Nangong Hua, I don't know what you're talking about. Since you think it's a plot by my Zhenwu dynasty, why don't you try your hand against these 3 friends? The Zhenwu Marquis sneered, then stepped back directly. He couldn't figure out the other side's intentions now. He could only retreat with his men first. This left the 2 7th Tribulation Realm experts from the Southern Cloud Kingdom somewhat puzzled. No need to bother with them. Jian Wushuang shook his head and said calmly, let's just go. There's no need to waste words with these people. You hit me, I hit you. What's the point? Their goal wasn't to waste time here. You're right. They're just frogs in a well. Wu Li sneered, retracting his divine power into his body, disdainfully glancing at the other side. This infuriated the 2 Southern Cloud Kingdom experts, who angrily said, looking down on us? Although they were angry, they now realized that the other party might have really passed through this place. But killing their emperor was a fact. Now that they've stopped them, they couldn't just let them go like this. Unfortunately, they were overthinking. If Jian Wushuang wanted to leave, not even an 8th Tribulation Realm expert could stop him. Whoosh! A pair of dark red wings spread out, covering the sky in an instant. With a slight tremble of his candle dragon wings, Jian Wushuang prepared to depart from this place with Danbao and Wu Li. The massive candle dragon wings, sharp and imbued with the complete origin source of space above, had now fully recovered to their peak state, comparable to a universe treasure of the 8th Tribulation Realm. The 2 7th Tribulation Realm experts from the Southern Cloud Kingdom were stunned when they saw these wings, especially with the powerful divine aura emanating from above, rendering them breathless. The sharp aura could instantly kill universe masters below the 7th Tribulation Realm. Even 7th Tribulation Realm beings felt a chill in the face of such a powerful treasure. Yet, this was just a part of the beast god weapon. The top 7th Tribulation Realm expert of the Zhenwu dynasty also felt extremely wary and couldn't help but step back. The wings tore through space, and Jian Wushuang was about to leave. But he was stopped by a shout. Jian Wushuang! The voice was familiar to Jian Wushuang, causing him to pause and turn to look at the densely packed army of the Zhenwu dynasty. He found the direction from which the voice came and saw the figure. Clad in a golden robe exuding an air of nobility, he sat in the middle of the army. his body stained with crimson blood. Jian Wushuang looked down at the figure. The figure in the golden robe also looked at Jian Wushuang. He had noticed Jian Wushuang early on but hadn't dared to believe it at that time. But upon seeing those dark red feathered wings, he was certain that the mysterious figure before him was indeed Jian Wushuang. The Jian Wushuang who entered the ancient moon spacetime with him. The same Jian Wushuang who had suggested bringing them into the alternate timeline. In the vast world of the higher heavens, after countless epochs, he finally saw someone familiar. If it weren't for Jian Wushuang's appearance, he would have thought everything was just a dream. Wushuang, why have you stopped? Wu Li, seeing Jian Wushuang frozen, attempted to reach out to him, but was stopped by Danbao. Jian Wushuang, ignoring the two beside him, slowly flew towards the army of the Zhenwu dynasty. This scene frightened the Zhenwu Marquis of the Zhenwu dynasty. He turned his head and looked at the figure in the golden robe covered in blood. Crown Prince. The figure in the golden robe was the Crown Prince of the Zhenwu dynasty, the future heir, the current Crown Prince, and a universe master of the fifth tribulation realm. He definitely had to be protected, otherwise the Zhenwu dynasty would be truly finished. Your Highness, if anything goes wrong, the dynasty will accelerate its collapse. But he could tell that the Crown Prince seemed to know this mysterious powerhouse. Yet he didn't dare to gamble. Immediately, he rushed towards the center of the army, intending to intercept Jian Wushuang. However, just as his figure reached Jian Wushuang's front, he realized it was only a residual image. He hadn't intercepted him at all. Jian Wushuang didn't even regard him as a threat. His figure flickered continuously, appearing slow but actually already in the midst of the central army. He arrived in front of the figure clad in golden robes. Coming to a stop, he looked up at the familiar figure. Long time no see. The figure in golden robes trembled, hurriedly walking up to Jian Wushuang, standing in front of him unsteadily, and said, "It's been so many years. Do you know how long I've been searching for you?" Jian Wushuang sighed. This was the Wanlu universe. How could they possibly find him here? Moreover, this was the vast world beneath the higher heavens, where time and space were entirely different. Seeing the sedimentation of the other party's aura, he knew that the other had been cultivating here for countless epochs. In the outside world, he had calculated that it had been just over 10,000 years. But here it was likely countless epochs had passed. From Emperor to the fifth tribulation realm. Zhen Wuyang. Jian Wushuang's voice was low. How come you're here? This was the Wanlu universe. Initially, when they entered the Celestial Maiden spacetime, theoretically, they should have appeared in the 9 heavens and 10 lands. He never would have imagined that Jian Wuyang would enter the Wanlu universe. And it was the Wanlu universe he had dreamt of entering. Comparisons were odious. Some begged to come in while others begged to leave. What do you mean? Jian Wuyang was puzzled for a moment. At this moment, Jian Wushuang explained, to make a long story short, this place is just a secret realm, or rather, the origin source universe of a super powerhouse. Origin source universe. Jian Wuyang's eyes widened as he heard the words. He hadn't expected that this immensely vast celestial world was merely the origin source universe of a super powerful being. And above the celestial dome, there was still the higher heavens. It was much larger than the original spacetime they had been in. After all, the space here was half the size of the ancient moon spacetime. It's worth noting that the ancient moon spacetime was one of the strongest 9 spacetime rivers in the northern region. The spacetime of the original universe was just a tributary upstream and downstream of the ancient moon spacetime. The space was less than 1/10 of the size of the ancient moon spacetime. Jian Wuyang, who had never seen the ancient moon spacetime, naturally wouldn't think that this place was just some kind of secret realm. Some things require a lengthy explanation. There are too many eyes and ears here. It's better to change locations. To find Jian Wuyang here was something he had never expected. He was quite happy about it deep down. Moreover, the other party's strength was quite good. He had already reached the 5th Tribulation Universe Master. Of course, this was also related to time. The inheritance here was stronger than the ancient moon spacetime, and Jin Wuyang had practiced for countless eons to become a fifth tribulation universe master, which was also within reason. Among the initial 10, in terms of potential, Jin Wuyang was in the second tier. He was much stronger than Dongshang and Wan Yen. It was reasonable for him to cultivate to the 5 tribulation stage. Changed locations? Jin Wuyang was instantly brought back to reality. This place was a battlefield. It was the battlefield between the Zhenwu dynasty and the Southern Cloud Kingdom. He was the crown prince of the Zhenwu dynasty, the future Zhenwu emperor. Now, could he still leave? Compared to the time in the original universe or in the Great Sea region, it felt more like a dream. He had lived here for countless months. If it weren't for Jian Wushuang's sudden appearance, he would have almost forgotten everything. He had also forgotten the oath he made in front of Qixin's tombstone. Speaking of which, his original aspirations seemed a bit childish now. So many years had passed, yet he hadn't felt any backlash from the oath. From this point of view, he felt that everything that had happened before was really just a dream. Forget it! Jin Wuyang broke free from Jian Wushuang's arm and shook his head. Some things can't be returned to. Jian Wushuang was surprised. Are you unable to let go of these people? He looked around. One of the top experts of the Zhenwu dynasty at the 7 tribulation stage was standing behind him. The other party didn't know about Jian Wushuang's relationship with Jin Wuyang. Crown Prince, do you know this Taoist friend? He looked towards Jian Wushuang. Now, the Zhenwu dynasty was surrounded by enemies on all sides. If they could have one more 7th tribulation expert to help, it would increase their chances of victory. However, Jin Wuyang didn't have that in mind at the moment. He didn't want to acknowledge everything that had happened before, yet he voluntarily admitted his relationship with Jian Wushuang. The contradiction between them also represented his conflicted heart. Danbao and Wu Li also flew over. Seeing the solemn expression on Jian Wushuang's face, they hesitated to speak. Are you really not coming with me? Jian Wushuang asked. No, the Great Sea region is long gone, and there's nothing worth reminiscing about in the Qixin Temple. It's just that I feel a bit sorry for that Jinling. Jin Wuyang shook his head with a bitter smile. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath. He didn't blame Jin Wuyang. If it were him, he might have also lost himself in the endless years. But he didn't understand what was so good about staying here. Even if there was nothing worth remembering about the Qixin Temple, it was better to leave and continue cultivation in the ancient moon spacetime. Why waste time between dynasties? The Zhenwu dynasty. Jian Wushuang turned to Jin Wuyang and said, Anyway, I was the one who brought you here in the first place. Whatever you need, just ask. He didn't want to give up just like that. Perhaps solving the troubles facing the Zhenwu dynasty could change Jin Wuyang's mind. The Great Sea region was gone, but the feelings were still there. He couldn't forget that he had almost become Jin Wuyang's son-in-law. And the other party had also helped him a lot. Even the opening of the Qixin Temple was closely related to Jin Wuyang. If it weren't for Jin Wuyang punishing him to go to the great desolate wilderness, the Qixin Temple wouldn't have been opened. Everything from the past was vivid in his mind. How could he forget? No need. Tell me about yourself. How did you end up here? Jin Wuyang didn't know how powerful Jian Wushuang was. Now the Zhenwu dynasty was facing the siege of several kingdoms, and he couldn't involve Jian Wushuang in this mess anymore. He had given up his former identity himself, so there was no reason to ask for Jian Wushuang's help again. I came here because of him. Jian Wushuang turned his head and pointed to Danbao, introducing, These two are my good friends, Danbao and Wu Li. Upon hearing the introduction, both of them politely nodded. Wu Li became even more curious about Jian Wushuang's identity. It seemed that he knew people everywhere. But back in the Wanlu Divine Realm, he had learned that Jian Wushuang came from a different spacetime and was not a practitioner of the ancient moon spacetime. Perhaps more than one person had come back then. After Jin Wuyang nodded in agreement, he awkwardly said, As you can see, the situation is special this time, and we can't accommodate you. That's simple. Jian Wushuang shrugged. Just tell me the information about Southern Cloud Kingdom. I'll help you solve it. Upon hearing this, Jin Wuyang was about to refuse, but Jin Wuho, who was standing aside, immediately spoke up with a faint smile. "Thank you, fellow Taoist, for offering to help. Without fellow Taoist's assistance, this time, several Seventh Tribulation experts from Southern Cloud Kingdom attacked our Zhenwu dynasty. If it weren't for their sudden arrival, the Crown Prince would have almost ascended the throne. Leave it to me." Jian Wushuang's aura surged, and he looked towards the distance. The experts from Southern Cloud Kingdom had already arrived. Upon witnessing the situation, Wu Li whispered, "Brother Wushuang, do you need my assistance?" With only the three of them present, Danbao's life force had almost depleted, slowly recovering without any combat capability whatsoever. At this moment, Wu Li naturally felt the need to offer his help. "No need. Just stay by Danbao's side," Jian Wushuang replied before ascending into the air. He headed towards the vast army of the Southern Cloud Kingdom. Seeing Jian Wushuang's decisive actions, the Zhenwu Marquis felt greatly pleased and immediately communicated with Zhenwu Yang. "Crown Prince, is this one of the friends you made during your travels?" After becoming the Universe Master, Zhenwu Yang had been away from the Zhenwu dynasty for nearly 1 billion epochs. Upon his return, he had already reached the level of a Fifth Tribulation Realm Universe Master, and his personality had undergone changes. However, his strength and potential had both been fully unleashed, and being the Crown Prince, he was promptly designated as the heir. Within the dynasty, no one opposed this decision. The founder of the Zhenwu dynasty was only a half-step 8th Tribulation's realm powerhouse, and the number of strong individuals under his command was limited. Among the younger generation, having a 5th Tribulation Realm Universe Master was already considered excellent. In fact, it was similar to the situation in the former Yu Kingdom. However, in terms of overall strength, it far surpassed the Yu Kingdom. Throughout the Zhenwu dynasty, there were several 7th Tribulation powerhouses, and the number of 6th Tribulation Realm experts numbered in the hundreds. Yet, the Zhenwu lineage's strong individuals were scarce. Hence, Zhenwu Yang, a 5th Tribulation Realm Universe Master, was highly valued. Moreover, he had now befriended a mysterious 7th Tribulation powerhouse and had achieved great feats. Looking at Jian Wushuang's departing figure, especially his astonishing wings, Zhenwu Marquis was certain that he could withstand the Southern Cloud Kingdom's strong individuals this time. As long as they held off the Southern Cloud Kingdom, they could catch their breath on other battlefronts. This time, being besieged by the 5 major kingdoms posed the greatest threat to him. Zhenwu Marquis, one of the top 3 super-strong individuals in the Zhenwu dynasty, taking charge personally. However, the Southern Cloud Kingdom had only dispatched 2 ordinary 7th Tribulation experts, evidently not daring to engage in direct confrontation. But upon hearing about the arrival of a mysterious powerhouse, the Southern Cloud Kingdom didn't dare to underestimate the situation and immediately mobilized all its forces. This time, in the assault on the Zhenwu dynasty, a total of 5 7th Tribulation powerhouses had come. Now they were all assembled. 2 ordinary 7th Tribulation Realm experts, 2 top 7th Tribulation Realm experts, and 1 peak 7th Tribulation Realm powerhouse. This lineup was indeed formidable, capable of crushing the current forces of the Zhenwu dynasty. Zhenwu Marquis also came along. After all, he was also a top 7th Tribulation Realm expert. Whoever has a horn on his head is the Lord Jujin from the Southern Cloud Kingdom. The rest are not worth worrying about. I alone can handle them. Just a few 7th Tribulation Realm experts. You don't need to intervene, just watch carefully. Jian Wushuang was very confident. With just these people, he didn't even need to unleash the super-eternal ancient transformation. With the Tribulation armor on, he had 2 million divine power. Dealing with these 7th Tribulation Realm experts was a piece of cake. The powerhouses from the Southern Cloud Kingdom, upon seeing Jian Wushuang's arrival, exchanged glances. It's him. He seems to be friends with the prince of the Zhenwu dynasty. He must be here to help. His divine power is only 1.5 million. Not as strong as you said. Behind the Lord Jujin floated 9 short swords, emitting a fierce aura. When he looked at Jian Wushuang, his gaze was icy. Although not afraid, since the other party was not from the Zhenwu dynasty, it was best not to take action if it could be avoided. He immediately shouted to Jian Wushuang, If you leave now, my southern cloud kingdom will let bygones be bygones. The same goes for you. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly and returned the words to the other party. What do you mean? Exactly what I said. He was wary of the other party, but he wasn't afraid of them. As soon as he finished speaking, his divine power suddenly erupted. The tribulation armor manifested, and his divine power surged to 2 million, instantly rushing towards the southern cloud kingdom's army. Since he chose to help Zhen Wuyang resolve the dynasty's disputes, he might as well resolve them all at once. Since none of them could become the god of life anyway, he didn't need to be polite. His innate desire for slaughter surged, ignoring those emperor-level figures and easily shattering countless arrays condensed by them. When the Lord Zhujin reacted, he was furious. His divine power exceeded 2 million, so he promptly confronted it. 9 short swords emitted a buzzing sound, converging into a perfect cage from the heavens, prepared to suppress Jian Wushuang. But in terms of swordsmanship, since Jian Wushuang became the universe master, especially after creating the Starry Sky 9 swords, he had subtly become a co-master of space-time swordsmanship. Let alone facing a 7th Tribulation Realm expert in swordsmanship, even an 8th Tribulation Realm expert didn't concern him. Before the 9 short swords could encase him, they were repelled by the power of the Tribulation armor. You dare to call yourself Lord Zhujin? 9-sword sovereign. Jian Wushuang sneered. His figure flashed, unexpectedly taking the initiative to pursue the 9 short swords. His speed surpassed that of the universe treasures. With just one hand, he grabbed one of the short swords, angrily shouted, and crushed it directly. A universe treasure at the 7th Tribulation Realm shattered in his hands like gravel. You! Lord Zhujin panicked, for a moment not knowing whether to retreat, watching helplessly as Jian Wushuang destroyed his 9 great universe treasures. That was a set of universe treasures at the 7th Tribulation Realm. Destroyed just like that. Jian Wushuang, donning tribulation armor, possessed 2 million divine power, combined with 5 times the power of the divine beasts, totaling 3 million divine power. He had reached the strength of the 8th Tribulation Realm threshold. Destroying a universe treasure was effortless. If it weren't for the need to destroy that item, he wouldn't even need to use the power of the beast god to kill Lord Zhujin. It's just that the opponent's swordsmanship was too lacking, almost painful to watch. If he didn't destroy that item, he wouldn't be able to get past himself. You are at the 8th Tribulation Realm. Lord Zhujin trembled, pointing at Jian Wushuang, angrily said, as an 8th Tribulation Realm cultivator, meddling in the disputes between dynasties, aren't you afraid of being hunted down by the Immortal Divine Temple's experts? In the vast world above, there was a clear law rule. No interference in the disputes between dynasties. This rule was to ensure that no one could dominate alone. Just because of the presence of an 8th Tribulation Realm expert, it couldn't dominate one region, leading to monopolization of resources. After hearing this rule, Jian Wushuang quite appreciated the Immortal Divine Temple for it. Such rules were indeed good. No matter how powerful a family was, it couldn't compare to all the beings in the infinite great world. Strong individuals struggled from among the masses. The strong ones cultivated by families were rarely superior to their predecessors. The existence of the Immortal Divine Temple was because of this. To accumulate more strong individuals, it was necessary to control the balance of resources. So those ancestors of dynasties were all at the half-step 8th Tribulation Realm. 8th Tribulation Realm experts, once defeated, wouldn't care about worldly matters anymore but would enter the Immortal Divine Temple, where all the 8th Tribulation Realm experts of the vast world gathered. Normally, to see an 8th Tribulation Realm expert, one needed to enter the Immortal Divine Temple. The Immortal Divine Temple also held regular preaching conferences, inviting some half-step 8th Tribulation Realm experts to provide guidance. All this was just transmitted to him by Zhen Wuyang. Hearing this, he was somewhat surprised. If the previous ones were for the sake of resource balance, he could still accept it. But the latter part was somewhat unreasonable. There were only so many resources, yet so many 8th Tribulation Realm experts had to be groomed? Why? Without a common threat, they wouldn't go to such lengths to promote their juniors. In a complete cultivator's world, cultivators were comparatively selfish. Just like the ancient Wood continent. Perhaps Divine Wood King wouldn't like to see any 8th Tribulation Realm expert surpassing him, or those countries producing new 8th Tribulation Realm experts. After all, there were only so many resources. If an additional 8th Tribulation Realm expert emerged, they would have to give up their share. Unless they thought their treasures were too many, but who would think their resources were too many? Taking out to nurture the younger generation, wouldn't that be better? At least the descendants would listen to oneself and wouldn't pose a threat. Could also help maintain one's position. That's how families are built. When Jian Wushuang was young, he also thought about establishing a family. But back then, because of teacher Xianxia, he saw a bigger world and gave up on the idea. To establish a family, one must wait until their strength is strong enough. When it's no longer possible to improve further, then one can establish a family, stabilize their power, plunder resources, and provide for their own cultivation. That's the greatest use of a family. Unexpectedly, in this vast Great Sky Dome world, there are still such rules. The 8th Tribulation Realm experts not only refrain from establishing families to prey on others but also restrain families. Their mindset is a waste even if they don't become gods. Zhen Wuyang, is there some hidden danger in the Great Sky Dome world that requires 8th Tribulation Realm experts to suppress? I'm not sure. I haven't heard of the Immortal Divine Temple taking action externally. It's just that some newly promoted 8th Tribulation Realm experts refuse to join the Immortal Divine Temple and are suppressed. Later, they are mostly released, and after being released, they choose to join the Immortal Divine Temple. Jian Wushuang's eyebrows jumped. This makes sense. Perhaps there is indeed some kind of threat that requires 8th Tribulation Realm experts to suppress, so they prohibit 8th Tribulation Realm experts from establishing forces. Zhen Wuyang's expression changed, hesitated for a moment, and then asked through voice transmission, Jian Wushuang, are you really in the 8th Tribulation Realm? You can think of it that way. His combat power is at the 8th Tribulation Realm, but he has not yet undergone the tribulation. According to the rules of the Immortal Divine Temple, once he reaches the combat power of the 8th Tribulation Realm, he will be forcibly incorporated into the Immortal Divine Temple. His realm cannot be seen by others. After reaching the level of Universe Master, his origin source exceeds the normal range of Universe Masters, making it difficult for outsiders to determine his realm. They will only judge his realm based on his combat power. They won't care about whether he's at the Tribulation Realm, just like Lord Jujian in front of him, so he didn't need to argue about anything. Now that you've found out about this, then go to hell. Jian Wushuang grinned, gathering divine power in his hands, and a dark red divine power surged instantly. With a single finger, he was ready to attack the army of the Southern Cloud Kingdom. Wait! A crisp shout made Jian Wushuang stop. Danbao couldn't bear to watch and stepped forward. If it were a war between the Zhenwu dynasty and the Southern Cloud Kingdom, he might not intervene. But with Jian Wushuang taking action, he had to come out to stop it. Clatter. Jian Wushuang directly retracted the divine power. He knew Danbao would intervene. The killing intent in his bones also dissipated. After hearing about the Immortal Divine Temple's existence, he actually didn't plan to take action anymore because it was meaningless. He couldn't just overthrow the Immortal Divine Temple for Zhen Wuyang's sake. If he didn't settle things with the Immortal Divine Temple, even if he subdued the Southern Cloud Kingdom, more forces would be involved. Everything was as Danbao said, predetermined. Can't be reversed. Seeing him stop, Danbao also breathed a sigh of relief. I'll spare your lives, but you must swear that you will never set foot in the Zhenwu dynasty again. Jian Wushuang's gaze was icy. If the other party didn't agree, he wouldn't mind killing these 7 Tribulation Realm experts. Mainly, he wanted to take Zhen Wuyang away from here. He didn't want to go back alone when the time came. You can stop us, Southern Cloud Kingdom, but you can't stop the Immortal Divine Temple. Although Lord Jujian spoke defiantly, he still made a vow. He just didn't believe that Jian Wushuang would dare to oppose the Immortal Divine Temple, to go against this rule. Jian Wushuang indeed wasn't prepared to antagonize the Immortal Divine Temple. He just wanted to persuade Zhen Wuyang to leave with him. He would stubbornly wait until the people from the Immortal Divine Temple came looking for trouble. After sending away the Southern Cloud Kingdom's army, the Zhenwu dynasty's army naturally felt excited, winning without a fight. In fact, it was a win-win situation. For the weaker ones, at least. Let's go, it's your territory now. Let me see how you've been doing all these years. After you. Zhen Wuyang waved his hand. A huge palace descended from the sky. Uncle, lead the army to support the king in the south. I'll entertain our guests. No problem. Leave the rest to me. The Zhenwu Marquis, Zhen Wuho, continued via voice transmission. If any senior is truly at the 8th Tribulation Realm, Uncle, rest assured, I know what to do. Zhen Wuyang understood what the other party wanted to say. If Jian Wushuang was at the 8th Tribulation Realm, it would attract the Immortal Divine Temple. If Jian Wushuang cooperated, it would be fine, but if not, it would involve them. Seeing that the other party understood the situation, Zhen Wuho didn't say much more. Thanks to Jian Wushuang's intervention this time, he drove away the strongmen of the Southern Cloud Kingdom. In this way, he could lead the army to support other battlefields and also relieve some pressure on the Zhenwu dynasty. Zhen Wuyang glanced at the battlefield, then, accompanied by his guards, entered the palace. The palace was a flying treasure of the universe. The speed was extremely fast. It would only take a day to reach the capital of the Zhenwu dynasty. After entering the main hall, Jian Wushuang invited the two to sit down casually. Soon Zhen Wuyang also walked in. Wushuang, thanks a lot this time. Zhen Wuyang was very polite, even showing a bit of respect when looking at Jian Wushuang. This was respect for a strong individual. Jian Wushuang's displayed strength had already reached the threshold of the 8th Tribulation Realm. Even those who were familiar with him would show him a bit more respect. Of course, except for people like Wu Li. Moreover, it had been a long time since Zhen Wuyang had seen Jian Wushuang. For Jian Wushuang, it had been over 10,000 years. But for Zhen Wuyang, it had been countless epochs. The time and space here were different from the outside world, even different from the higher heavens. It was more like two extremes. In the higher heavens, one day was almost equivalent to an epoch in the outside world. But in the Great Sky Dome world, spending an epoch here was only a day in the outside world. They belonged to two extremes. No need to be so polite. I just dealt with it casually. Jian Wushuang waved his hand. This kind of thing was too simple for him. Zhen Wuyang personally brewed tea, poured it for the three of them, and then spoke again. These years, I've actually looked for you many times. I even thought you had fallen. To be honest, I haven't looked for your whereabouts outside. I've been cultivating all along. Jian Wushuang shook his head, adding, the flow of time outside is much slower. In fact, it's only been 10,000 years since we left Qixin Temple. 10,000 years. Zhen Wuyang took a deep breath. He wasn't surprised by the speed of time flow. He was shocked that Jian Wushuang, in just 10,000 years, had gone from an emperor to a powerhouse comparable to someone at the 8th Tribulation Realm. If this were said, probably no one would believe it. Wu Li had been following Jian Wushuang all along and hadn't felt any significant change in his own strength within the past 10,000 years. Although it was said to be 10,000 years, in reality within 100 years, earth-shattering changes had occurred. Since encountering Danbao, their speed had increased exponentially. Facing the Gula of the Frost Demon clan back then, with just 1 million divine powers, they felt unprecedented pressure. But now, with a slight transformation, they could easily crush Gula. Even if they were left to ponder on their own, they wouldn't dare to imagine something this grand. Jian Wushuang noticed the curiosity in the other party's eyes and took the opportunity to recount the events of the past 10,000 years. There wasn't much to hide because there was nothing worth concealing. The matters concerning Babidi or the Wanlu universe were now common knowledge. Zhen Wuyang listened intently, captivated. He had thought his own world was vast enough, but he hadn't expected the outside world to be even more thrilling. For a moment, a hint of longing appeared in his eyes. Jian Wushuang seized the moment. Actually, this is just the beginning here. The vast expanse of the outside world is our true journey. As for the Qixin Temple, I am capable of dealing with it. Once I'm done with matters here, I'll return to the Qixin temple. How about we go together? Return. A glimmer flashed in Jin Wuyong's eyes as he shook his head slowly. Jian Wushuang, to be honest, I've always felt like those past events were like a dream. If it weren't for seeing you, I might have taken everything as a dream. His determination puzzled Jian Wushuang. Is there something in the Zhenwu dynasty that you can't let go of? He thought of the current predicament of the Zhenwu dynasty, which was due to the imminent passing of the Zhenwu emperor. In fact, this was simple for him. He could help Jin Wuyong recover. There is. At this, Jin Wuyong stood up abruptly. They had already arrived at the capital of the Zhenwu dynasty. Within the grand hall, they could see the entirety of the capital. In the center of the royal city stood a statue of the Zhenwu emperor. Seeing the statue, Jian Wushuang felt a shock in his heart. No wonder Jin Wuyong feels like everything in the past was a dream. The Zhenwu inheritance he received probably originated from this place. He pondered inwardly as the grand hall slowly descended into the ground. Let's go. Let's visit my residence. After arriving at the capital, Jin Wuyong seemed completely transformed, very amiable. He no longer exuded the imperial majesty he had in the Great Sea region. There was no sense of superiority. Instead, he seemed like an extraordinarily ordinary person. Jian Wushuang observed these changes. Outside the mansion, there were no guards. As they approached the door, it opened silently. Before entering the mansion, Jian Wushuang heard the sounds of children playing. Jin Wuyong heard the sounds too and glanced at Jian Wushuang, smiling faintly. Those must be my grandchildren. Grandchildren? That made sense. Jin Wuyong had spent over countless eons in the great Sky Dome world. It was likely that his descendants had multiplied for countless generations. But when he entered the mansion and saw the children, he froze. The bloodline power of these children was extremely potent. Almost all of them possessed 70% of Jin Wuyong's bloodline. This would have been impossible in the outside world or the original universe. Seeing Jian Wushuang's surprised expression, Jin Wuyong explained, I was surprised at first too, but later I found out that it's very difficult for the universe masters to have offspring again. However, once they do, the bloodline power becomes even stronger. These little ones, they're born as immortals, what we initially thought of as Yen immortals. Ah, I see. Jian Wushuang listened intently, though he actually didn't understand any of it. He hadn't expected Jin Wuyong to settle down here. As a cultivator, how could he comprehend worldly matters? Hey, little guy! A chubby child, carried by Jin Wuyong, was affectionately pinched on the cheek. Several other children with similar features followed behind. A scene of familial bliss. Jian Wushuang had no opinion on this because he couldn't understand it. Wu Li, on the other hand, was an expert in this regard and looked down upon it. Because even the family he had built could be abandoned. He had long been indifferent to familial bonds. Jin Wuyong was the same before. He didn't pay much attention to his sons and daughters, most of whom were given territories to govern. Even his own sons dared not be presumptuous in his presence. But now he doted on his grandchildren so much. Father! Not far down the corridor, an elegant lady approached, bowing to Jin Wuyong and quickly taking the child from his hands. These are father's good friends. Why don't you greet them? The noblewoman raised her eyebrows and, turning to Jian Wushuang and the others, also bowed. Jian Wushuang nudged the dazed Wu Li and, smiling at the woman in front of him, asked, And who might you be? Forgive my forgetfulness. This is my eldest daughter. Jin Wuyong smiled proudly. This princess didn't resemble Jin Wuyong's other children in the Great Sea region at all. But her veins carried the purest blood of Jin Wuyong. And even her child had a quarter of Jin Wuyong's blood. Oh right, let Mu'er come to the Xuanwu Hall. Tell him there are guests. Jin Wuyong casually ordered before leading Jian Wushuang and the others into the inner room. Entering the Xuanwu Hall, they found it wasn't a grand hall but more like a study. It was cleverly arranged and cozy. Books and scrolls were placed nearby, and everyone took their seats. Ah! Jian Wushuang exhaled deeply, feeling impressed. No wonder you don't want to leave. I might even want to stay here. At this moment, Wu Li interjected, Wu Shuang, with your control over the power of life, you don't need women. You can create life on your own. There's nothing special about that. The power of life. Zhen Wuyang finally remembered that Jian Wushuang had control over the power of life. He hadn't thought much of it before, but now, after coming here, he understood how crazy it was to face the power of life during the tribulation. According to common sense, the great universe shouldn't lack the power of life. But at some point, the power of life generated here became scarcer. Because the power of life in the sky dome came from the higher heavens, many people thought there was a problem with the higher heavens. But there was no way to verify it. The power of life shouldn't be used recklessly. Danbao shook his head, denying Wu Li's words. Seeing this, Wu Li kept quiet. Even his own father treated Danbao with great respect, so he didn't dare to cause trouble. It wasn't like before when he would casually reach out and touch someone's head. Tell us about the ancestor of your Zhen Wu dynasty. Zhen Wuyang's expression changed slightly at this, sighing, greedy. In fact, the ancestor had quite a bit of vitality initially, but because of greed, when he entered the Universal Sea, his vitality rapidly diminished. The Universal Sea? Jian Wushuang nodded slightly. At present, he had gained some understanding of the sky dome from Zhen Wuyang. The sky dome was below, and the higher heavens were above. In between them lay the Universal Sea. It was fraught with danger but also contained countless treasures. Among them were mysterious treasures that had disappeared from the outside world, as well as fruits imbued with divine power. Some treasures were enough to make even those at the 8th Tribulation realm covetous. It was normal for Zhen Huayang to be injured and lose vitality due to his adventures. Sigh! All because of a treasure. Zhen Wuyang shook his head. In fact, such things were quite normal. Jian Wushuang and the others were also pushing themselves to the limit. Those who ventured out would eventually meet their downfall. It was impossible to always be so lucky. Jian Wushuang had absolute experience in this regard, almost dancing on the edge of a knife every time. There were very few instances of having absolute certainty of good fortune. I can help you with this matter. Zhen Wuyang had been silent all along, hesitating. He was worried about owing Jian Wushuang too much, fearing that he would have to leave here eventually. So Jian Wushuang just brought it up directly. As for whether to return or not, he didn't insist. Although he had made a promise with Jinling at the beginning, what Jinling cared about was resolving the threat of Qishan Temple and restoring it to its peak. Jian Wushuang was confident in helping Jinling achieve this, so there was no need to drag Zhen Wuyang back with him. Weren't there other people? Moreover, he had dealt with Mieshang and the Temple of World Annihilation, leading Qishan Temple to greater heights. Jinling wouldn't care about Zhen Wuyang. Zhen Wuyang himself felt somewhat embarrassed. When he entered here, it was Jinling who helped him. He was able to reach the peak solely because of the opportunities within Qishan Temple. Now that he was not going back, Jian Wushuang was still helping him like this. People with self-respect would feel uneasy. You don't need to think too much about it. This is between us. Well then, thank you very much. Zhen Wuyang's body trembled slightly, and there was a gleam in his eyes. Once Zhen Wuyang regained vitality, the forces attacking Zhen Wu dynasty would also retreat. Everything would be resolved effortlessly. However, there's something I don't quite understand. Why would you still rely so much on worldly matters after reaching this level? Jian Wushuang voiced his doubts from the bottom of his heart. Although the previous events were indeed moving, he couldn't believe that Zhen Wuyang hadn't experienced similar things when he was weak. Although what Wu Li said was somewhat unpleasant to hear, it made sense. How could they still be obsessed with such matters at their level? Zhen Wuyang took a deep breath, about to speak, when he sensed a familiar aura approaching from outside the hall. Outside the Xuanwu Hall, a young man who bore a striking resemblance to Zhen Wuyang, with a majestic aura and a resolute face. He was Zhen Wuyang's son, who had only been born for a few epochs but had already reached the realm of Universe Master at the 3rd Tribulation level, possessing extremely formidable strength. Although he was only a 3rd Tribulation Universe Master, he had 500,000 units of divine power. He could battle across levels. In the Zhenwu dynasty, he was the most outstanding genius among the younger generation. At this moment, he walked up to the front of the hall, took a deep breath, and entered. He had heard that this time, his father had summoned a super-existence to resist the Southern Cloud Kingdom and repelled their army. Now they were hosting a banquet. It must be that super-existence. With a curious heart, he entered the grand hall. At a glance, he saw Jian Wushuang, but he didn't sense any aura from him, giving the impression of an ordinary person. Jian Wushuang, let me introduce you. This is my son, Zhen Wuyang. He's now also a universe master at the third tribulation realm. Zhen Wuyang's eyes gleamed with pride as he saw his son enter. Respects to all seniors. Zhen Wuyang bowed respectfully. Jian Wushuang nodded in admiration, saying, "Indeed remarkable. At such a young age, becoming a universe master. Your future achievements may surpass even yours." Considering the time he had spent cultivating wasn't long. "All right, let's head to the back hall. I've already arranged for a banquet. No trouble at all," Jian Wushuang politely responded. Then, accompanied by Danbao and Wu Li, followed Zhen Wuyang into the back hall. At the banquet, Zhen Wuyang's daughter and wife were also present. Seeing Zhen Wuyang's wife, Jian Wushuang understood why Zhen Wuyang cherished his family at this moment so much. She looked exactly like the woman from his days in the Grand Sea region. Perhaps it was fate. During the banquet, they discussed many things mostly related to the affairs of the Great Sky Dome world. Jian Wushuang also took the opportunity to inquire about matters regarding the higher heavens from Zhen Wuyang. Even with the power of his bloodline, Danbao couldn't sense Elder Blue's whereabouts. It was likely that the Elder and others had reached the higher heavens. They had unexpectedly entered the Great Sky Dome world. The most important thing now was to help Danbao become the god of life. For Zhen Wuyang, this was just a minor episode. Since the other party was unwilling to leave, Jian Wushuang saw no need to continue persuading. After the banquet ended, it was already late at night. At this time, the high-level experts of the dynasty also arrived at Zhen Wuyang's mansion. Their purpose was simple, to understand more about Jian Wushuang. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Zhen Wuyang took Jian Wushuang to the palace. There, they met the Emperor Zhenwu. Originally, they intended for Danbao to act, but Danbao's foundation was damaged, rendering him unable to even use the Shield of Life. Thus, Zhen Wuyang had to personally intervene to help the Emperor Zhenwu regain vitality. However, it didn't require much life power. The Emperor was only at the half-step 8th Tribulation Realm. Even for a Universe Master at the 8th Tribulation Realm, it posed no challenge to Jian Wushuang. The Emperor Zhenwu's vitality was restored to its peak. It also meant that the influence of the Zhenwu dynasty had been consolidated. The forces attacking from all directions, upon learning that Emperor Zhenwu had regained vitality, were shocked and curious, but dared not attack recklessly anymore. These were all unspoken rules. As long as there was a half-step 8th Tribulation Realm existence, all forces understood that continuing the fight would be detrimental to everyone. They quickly withdrew their troops. At the same time, they speculated whether it was related to the mysterious strongman who defeated the Southern Cloud Kingdom's army. After all, right after defeating the Southern Cloud Kingdom's army, Emperor Zhenwu regained vitality. The intricacies of this were known only to those involved, having helped Zhen Wuyang fulfill his greatest wish. Regardless of Zhen Wuyang's feelings, Jian Wushuang had done his utmost. Declining Emperor Zhenwu's banquet, Jian Wushuang, accompanied by Danbao and Wu Li, prepared to leave directly. At the city gate, Jian Wushuang asked Zhen Wuyang's thoughts for the last time. "Aren't you going to leave?" "Not leaving." Zhen Wuyang shook his head, his complexion much better than before. He turned to Jian Wushuang and said firmly, "Actually, at my stage, I already understand fate. Perhaps this life is all there is. Even if I venture out again, it would only hold you back." "How could that be?" Jian Wushuang spread his hands and said, "At least, you've already become a universe master at the 5th Tribulation Realm. That's nothing. In the vast sea of beings, the 5th Tribulation Realm is merely a shooting star. At our level, if there's no room for improvement, what matters most is what we leave behind. I don't want to look back at this life and find nothing to be proud of when I pass away. Jian Wushuang sighed. Perhaps you're right. Both fell into silence simultaneously. Zhen Wuyang was right. Back then, when Qixin reached the half-step 8th tribulation realm, he had left behind Qixin Temple and even cooperated with Mieshang, all to leave a glimmer of hope. Now, Zhen Wuyang was doing the same. It's just that what they left behind was different. I'm leaving. Jian Wushuang regained his composure, his figure slowly ascending. He looked down at Zhen Wuyang for the last time, his tone indifferent. Take care. You too. With their final farewell, Jian Wushuang and his two companions soared into the air, leaving the capital of the Zhenwu dynasty in an instant. After flying a distance, they tore through the space and left the Zhenwu dynasty. Feeling the disappearance of their presence, Zhen Wuyang stood on the city wall, not turning around for a long time. His gaze was somewhat murky, only leaving when he could no longer sense Jian Wushuang's aura. Of course, that was just temporary. Following Jian Wushuang might ignite temporary passion, but alas, such acts are only for the young. Higher heavens. In the icy world surrounded by auroras, the sky was cold and the ground frozen. It was utterly different from what those cultivators from outside had imagined. Realm King's words were spot on. In the current universe of Wanlu, the origin source had already been damaged. The spaces they initially entered were the true appearance of Wanlu universe. Lush with foliage, verdant with life. But now it was desolate and silent. Not a soul in sight. Whoosh! Above the higher heavens, a thunderous vortex quietly emerged. Dozens of figures swiftly dashed out from within. It's bad. The entire heavens are in the same state. Seems even more serious than what Lord Realm King described. The great monk furrowed his brows, speaking coldly. Forget about that. Finding the young master is crucial. Since he's not in the higher heavens, he must be in the great sky dome world below. The great sky dome world? How do we get in? Although Lord Hengmu was a native of Wanlu universe, he had only lived in the higher heavens. Apart from hearing about the great sky dome world below, he had never been there. It's simple, we head to the universe C. After all, the stairway to godhood is in the universe C. We'll have to go there sooner or later. Divinewood King and the others could only stare blankly, completely unfamiliar with this place. All right, then lead the way. The group quickly made a decision, with the great monk leading the way towards the universe C. The universe C was actually the sea of the origin source of life. It was also the buffer between the higher heavens and the great sky dome world. All the treasures of Wanlu universe flowed out from there. It was also the core of Wanlu universe, the land of the origin source. Most likely the metallic life form that Realm King spoke of was there. They had to deal with this trouble before they could help Danbao ascend the stairway to godhood. Divinewood King and the others set off towards the universe C. Jian Wushuang was doing the same. With Danbao and Wu Li, he left the Zhenwu dynasty, swiftly advancing towards the entrance of the universe C. The original plan was to directly ascend the stairway to godhood. But Realm King's appearance disrupted the plan. They had to deal with the trouble of metallic life form. Naturally, they had to make the most of their time. Wushuang, is the entrance to the universe C really as those old folks described? Wu Li's tone carried a hint of skepticism. When they were helping Emperor Zhenwu recover, they learned about the entrance to the universe C and how it formed from the emperor himself. Jian Wushuang took the opportunity to inquire about the higher heavens. But the emperor didn't seem to know much about it either. The highest authority in the great sky dome world was still the Immortal Temple. Perhaps the emperor knew, but he didn't recognize a particular person, so there was no way to ask further. They decided to let it go. The meeting with Great Monk and the others might not require their concern after all. Both Great Monk and Lord Hengmu were natives of the Wanlu universe and practitioners of the higher heavens. They must know something. The strong individuals of the Sky Dome world could all enter the universe C, let alone the higher heavens. If necessary, they could forcibly enter the universe C by shattering the spacetime tunnel. The entrance to the Universe C in the Sky Dome world appeared because two super beings accidentally opened it during their battle. So Wu Li was somewhat skeptical. He felt that Emperor Jin Wu might be exaggerating. After they arrived in this world, they had long since understood the space-time intensity here. It was definitely not the origin source universe of ordinary practitioners. Even in the ancient moon spacetime, they could easily break through the origin source universe of a peak 8th tribulation universe master. Of course, it was only breaking through spacetime and only creating a small opening. Complete destruction was impossible. Even an 8th tribulation universe master couldn't destroy it even if they let them attack freely. That's the power of an 8th tribulation universe master. The key was they wouldn't just let you attack. It's likely they'd suppress you with their will as soon as they appeared. What they encountered now were just scattered tribulations. Maybe they thought an 8th tribulation realm was nothing special. It's well known that scattered tribulations and universe masters are two different concepts. Now Jian Wushuang's divine power could erupt twice as strong. Coupled with the Starry Sky Sword Dao, he could defeat ordinary 8th tribulation realms, or even contend with the top-tier 8th tribulation realm experts. But when encountering universe masters of the 8th tribulation realm, their divine power was inexhaustible, coupled with their origin source Dao arena. Even the weakest 8th tribulation universe master had tens of millions of divine power. Suppressing Jian Wushuang would be as easy as lifting a hand. Their personal strength did not represent the spatial strength of the origin source universe. Regardless, it was still at the level of the universe. It was not comparable to the spacetime origin source of the River of Time. Jian Wushuang remembered Jinling from before. With Jinling's strength, they were able to open the tunnel connecting to the ancient moon spacetime back then, even though Realm King secretly intervened. It was quite challenging. With the power of a peak half-step 7 tribulation realm at best, coupled with the Qixin Temple itself, possessing the strength of 7th tribulation's realm was already commendable. Even with such strength, one could open a spacetime tunnel. However, in the Wanlu universe, Jian Wushuang's strength was undoubtedly much stronger than Jinling of the past. Yet, it couldn't even shake the spacetime of the Wanlu universe. The Wanlu universe, the spatial structure it formed. It was even more formidable than the spacetime river outside. Wu Li and the others were unaware of this. But he knew that the Wanlu divine tree was brought over by Weiss. Even Realm King didn't have the qualifications to manipulate it. It must be much stronger than spacetime. Within this universe, wanting to create an entrance to the Universe C through battle was indeed strange. Unless there had been a 9th tribulation realm within the Wanlu divine tree. If there had really been a 9th tribulation realm, the great monk would have known. But he had never mentioned it. Jian Wushuang pondered for a moment and said helplessly, "Don't worry about it too much. We're not here to study the Wanlu universe. Let's enter the Universe C first. There may be countless treasures there. With some luck, we might even hit the jackpot." Great minds think alike. Wu Li licked his lips. They were all ordinary people, inevitably fascinated by treasures. With Dan Bao about to ascend to godhood, they naturally looked down on these treasures. By helping Dan Bao ascend to godhood, they would be able to obtain a large number of treasures. Although the danger level of entering the Wanlu universe this time was much higher, the probability of obtaining treasures was almost a certainty. And there was the promise of Realm King. Now everyone was eagerly anticipating it. While they were envisioning their future, at the peak of the Sky Dome world, there floated a grand hall that had remained motionless for countless ages. It was observing every move of Jian Wushuang and the others. Inside the gloomy hall, upon sensing that Jian Wushuang and the others' goal was the Universe C, an ancient sigh echoed. 2 at the 6th tribulation realm, 1 unfathomable. None of them are native powerhouses of the Sky Dome world. Buzz. After the voice inside the grand hall sounded, thrones rose from the ground, each with towering figures sitting atop them. 3 grand thrones were at the topmost level. Click. A crisp sound pierced the air, and 3 pairs of eyes snapped open. They all turned to the person who spoke. "Chaoga, are you the one guarding the Undying Temple this time?" "My lord." The young figure, now known as Chaoga, emerged from the shadows and bowed slightly to the 3 thrones. These were the three divine spirits of the Immortal Divine Temple. They were also the superbeings who originally founded the Immortal Divine Temple. Chowga was merely an executor of this generation's Immortal Divine Temple. Encountering an anomaly, he summoned the three ancient divine spirits, and he disclosed what he had been monitoring. The three divine spirits sat atop their thrones, unmoving. After hearing Chowga's report, they became somewhat uneasy. Sixth Tribulation Realm? Surpassing the pinnacle of the Seventh Tribulation Realm? Yes, and there's another Sixth Tribulation Realm who hasn't made a move yet, but their divine power exceeds 1.5 million. Chowga recounted one by one. To him, the most mysterious was the green-skinned youth that even the Immortal Divine Temple couldn't fathom. Danbao. After deliberating for a while, the three divine spirits spoke. Since they're not from the Sky Dome world, they probably came from the higher heavens. It's perfect timing to capture them and inquire about some matters from the higher heavens. Don't let them enter the universe. See. You shall handle this personally. Yes. Chowga accepted the command. For years, the life springs of the Sky Dome world had dried up. They had been considering how to ascend to the higher heavens. Encountering three practitioners who seemed to have come from the higher heavens naturally meant they had to capture and interrogate them. A sixth tribulation realm rivaling the strength of the eighth tribulation realm. This was the first time they had encountered such a situation. And there was one whom even the Immortal Divine Temple couldn't monitor. Obviously extraordinary. Either it was a being beyond their understanding or they possessed some kind of treasure. If it was an existence beyond their understanding, all the better. They could seek advice instead of simply capturing them. So when Chowga went forth this time, he had to be careful. First, ascertain the opponent's details, then take action. These matters didn't require instructions from the three divine spirits. He could figure them out himself. Summoning 10 slumbering 8th Tribulation Realm divine spirit envoys from the temple, Chowga set off in the direction of Jian Wushuang and the others. Immortal Divine Temple. Established by the three divine spirits. In every era, there emerges a universe master of the 8th Tribulation Realm who leads the way. In this era, it is Chowga who commands the Immortal Divine Temple. Moreover, as long as one enters the Immortal Divine Temple at the 8th Tribulation Realm, they will never fall. The origin of the Immortal Divine Temple is also due to this. Eternal existence. Divine power is immortal. This is closely related to a source within the Immortal Divine Temple. Within it, the power of life continuously births. As long as one slumbers within the Immortal Divine Temple, not only will they not lose vitality, but they will also gradually regain it. Unfortunately, it's unclear when the source of the Immortal Divine Temple began to wither. Although a considerable amount of life force was stored initially, it proved insufficient. So, strong individuals were dispatched to the Universe Sea to seek life treasures to invest in the Immortal Divine Temple. It's akin to planting trees for future generations to enjoy the shade. All preparations are made for the future. The 8th Tribulation Universe Masters of today venture into the Universe Sea, and the life force they harvest is all freely given to the Immortal Divine Temple. When they fail their tribulation, they can then settle in the Immortal Divine Temple. Chowga summoned the 10 great divine spirit envoys. They are all 8th Tribulation Universe Masters who failed their tribulations in the past. Without a universe now, they are essentially no different from the scattered tribulation strong individuals in the outside world. It's just that the 8th Tribulation strong individuals from the outside world, by the time they reach their age, are highly likely to have perished. The birth of the Wanlu universe is many times older than the ancient moon spacetime. The divine spirit envoys summoned are all 8th Tribulation strong individuals from countless eras ago. The departure of these strong individuals is very secretive. It wasn't until they approached Jian Wushuang and the others that they were noticed. Someone's behind us. The first to notice was Danbao. His sensitivity to life is even stronger than Jian Wushuang's. He was the first to discover the strong individuals from the Immortal Divine Temple behind them. Jian Wushuang and the others have just arrived above the ocean of stars where the Universe Sea is located. There is still an hour's journey to the entrance. It has been several days since they left the Zhenwu dynasty. Unexpectedly, just before entering the Universe C, they were being targeted. The first thing that came to mind was the Immortal Divine Temple. Apart from this organization, Jian Wushuang couldn't think of anyone else. Only they would have the audacity to pursue them. Don't panic. They can't catch up. Jian Wushuang's brow furrowed. He had already kept some tricks up his sleeve and hadn't used full speed, fearing they would be targeted. With precaution taken early on, how could he not keep something in reserve? Splash! With the candle dragon feathers fully spread, a majestic universe descended from the sky. Universe super travel. All things gathered and descended. Jian Wushuang's origin source universe arrived. 100,000 black holes connected into stars, guarding the cosmic spacetime in all directions. This scene startled Chaoga, who was chasing from behind. Universe Dao Arena. Is he the universe master of the 8 tribulations realm? And he could even detect them. That was the most terrifying part. At this moment, they were still far from Jian Wushuang. They could only see the outline of Jian Wushuang's origin source universe. Before they could get a clear view, the universe disappeared the next moment. Only ripples were left behind. Shuttling through the universe was not as simple as it sounded. Jian Wushuang was traversing with his own universe. Each time it was the distance of his own origin source universe. His speed was unparalleled, much faster than the previous 3-Quake universe. To put it bluntly, whereas before Jian Wushuang's candle dragon wings had to fly 3 times, now one trip was the distance of a universe. Moreover, his universe was much larger than that of the universe masters of the 8 tribulation realm. It was like his speed had tripled. The speed of the spacetime hall that Chaoga was riding in could have caught up with Jian Wushuang originally, and it could even conceal their aura, but unexpectedly, they were suddenly discovered. Now, whether to chase or not was a dilemma. Their target is the Universe C. Notify Lord Divine Spirit. Chaoga gritted his teeth. They had planned everything, but before they could even show up, they were shaken off. They could only inform the 3 major divine spirits. Only the 3 major divine spirits could stop Jian Wushuang from entering the Universe C. Once Jian Wushuang entered the Universe C, even if the divine spirits came, they wouldn't be able to find him. The Universe C was vast, with countless celestial worlds. There it was boundless, no end in sight. The space was infinitely vast, and the time of the Universe C's existence was immeasurable, because there was no trace of time. The Immortal Divine Temple, the temple that had remained motionless for billions of years, began to tremble at this moment. Let's go in person. The 3 divine spirits felt somewhat helpless. When the source of life was not cut off, they could manipulate the Immortal Divine Temple as they pleased. But not anymore, because the power used by the Immortal Divine Temple was the power of life. Every activation consumed a great cost. They used to not care, but now that they were living more carefully, they didn't dare to waste anymore. But now, in order to investigate the matter of the cut-off life source, facing 3 mysterious practitioners with questionable backgrounds and peculiar strengths, they had no choice. The initial investigation by the Immortal Divine Temple only revealed a cultivation level of the 6th tribulation realm. However, now it could host its own Universe Dao Arena, a feat achievable only by a universe master of the 8th tribulation realm. Moreover, the scale of this universe was immense, far surpassing the expectations for an 8th tribulation realm existence. The 3 divine spirits observing from the Immortal Divine Temple all took note of Danbao. Unable to discern the truth, they attributed these occurrences to Danbao. TSK, since they flee upon facing us, there's nothing to fear. Let's intercept them at the entrance to the Universe C. Let's go. The 3 great divine spirits collectively manipulated the Immortal Divine Temple. In the blink of an eye, they arrived above a certain area of the sea. Below stretched an endless expanse of azure ocean, while above loomed a colossal black hole filled with countless vortices, seemingly capable of devouring everything. The entrance to the Universe C, accidentally ruptured by 2 superexistences in the past. The origin of the Immortal Divine Temple traced back to this event. The emergence of the Universe C had further empowered cultivators in the Great Sky Dome world. From the Universe C, the three divine spirits obtained the immortal divine temple and its life force. With the life force within the temple, they came to dominate the entire Sky Dome world. Although there were some special beings exempt from tribulation, they were different from those outside. External special beings could enhance their divine power with divine artifacts, whereas these beings required life force to boost their divine power. This fact was almost common knowledge, to the extent that even Jin Wuyang had forgotten to inform Jian Wushuang about it. If Jian Wushuang had known, it would have been a profound shock. When life force could be consumed to transform into boundless divine power, certain matters began to make sense. Those who relied on devouring life force to enhance their divine power could only be associated with Miesheng. These special beings, however, were birthed from the Wanlu universe, which made them all the more terrifying. Their schemes ran deep. The immortal divine temple hovered above the sea, awaiting Jian Wushuang's arrival, while the three divine spirits stood on the temple's white stone slab,